Hello. Good morning. I believe there's something wrong with my microphone settings. Let me check. Is this better? Is this better? Is this better? I hope it's better. I don't really wanna make myself too loud. I'm checking now. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am late once again. I woke up late once again. It's just a norm by now. Don't expect me to wake up early anymore. Jesus. We're gonna finish up the book today because there's only like the book is quite short. It's 6 chapters. I covered 3 chapters the day before. Today we're gonna finish up the 3 chapters. So yeah, all's good. Here's some bread chewing ASMR for you. Mmm. Give me a second, okay? I'm gonna chow down this bread and then I'll be okay to start. Is there anyone here? Anyone here? Please raise your hand. Okay. Since nobody is here, I'm just gonna finish up my bread. Okay, ladies and gents, it's time to start reading. Sorry, took me a while because I'm busy eating, man. Gotta eat my breakfast before reading. All right, let's start. Today we are reading. Today we are reading The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Matsukawa. So far, it's not really my favorite book thus far. I feel like there's this type of pace and idea that Japanese authors always run with, like Lonely Castle in the mirror, and uh, the before the coffee gets cold. The sweet bean paste. They they all have like same formula kind of, like an ordinary thing, extraordinary things happen, or out of the world extraordinary things happen, and you go to that other world, and then you come back to this world, and then like you're saving things. So I'm not crazy about this kind of stories, to be completely honest, but because I've started the book, I have to end the book. Um, I do this for every books, even if it's a Haruki Murakami book. But I have stopped purchasing Haruki Murakami's book because I hate his books. I know I'm like the only one person who do not like Haruki Murakami in this world. Anyway, I don't know why I segue to that. Um, let's start reading. The Cat Who Saved Books, by Sosuke Matsukawa. The third chapter, The Third Labyrinth, The Seller of Books. Okay, that's the end of today's lesson. See you tomorrow. At the sound of the teacher's voice, all the students simultaneously pushed their chairs back and got noisily on their feet. Oh, 1 second, I forgot lip balm. Very important. Ugh, it's finally over. I'm starving. Do you have club today? The classroom was filled with a cacophony of voices. Sayo Yuzuki also stood up, neatly packing her textbook, notebook, and pencil into her bag. She glanced in the direction of the window and clocked the one empty seat amidst of all the ruckus. Absent again, she said. It was, of course, the seat belonging to Rintaro Natsuki. His not being there didn't make any difference at the atmosphere in the classroom. He wasn't one to cast much of an he wasn't one to cast much of a shadow. Nobody was particularly bothered by his absence, and until a few days ago, Sayo had been the same as everyone else. But now, things were different. She could tell herself that it was because she was a class rep or that she lived near him she needed to deliver his homework. But he knew that it wasn't the reason. The old image of Rintaro, the quiet boy with no presence and his nose perpetually in a book, floated into her mind. But now, the image he was accompanied by a ginger tabby cat. Hey, is Natsuki absent again? Sayo turned to see who had spoken. Just outside the door was a tall boy from the year above, Ryota Akiba, the captain of the basketball team and brainiest student in the senior year, smiled at her. He was excessively cheery, attracting the ardent gaze of many of the female students. What do you want, Akiba? Sayo regarded him coldly. Being on the student council together, the two were used to being in regular contact with each other. But today, Sayo had no patience for his cockiness. She was never one for diplomacy when feelings were concerned. She was being pointedly unfriendly, but Akiba seemed amused. Seems Natsuki hasn't been coming to school. That's a problem. That doesn't sound very convincing coming from the senior who went AWOL along with him. Hey, I'm offended. All I did was pay a visit to the poor boy in need of some cheering up. He lost his grandpa, you know. Akiba winked at the passing girl. His tactlessness made Sayo roll her eyes. Okay, well, if you're so into cheering him up, maybe perhaps you would like to pay that poor boy another visit and deliver his homework. I have yesterday's handouts here too, said Sayo. What? You're not gonna take them? Akiba asked. I don't know how to cheer a boy who's grieving over his grandpa. Maybe this is a situation best left to another boy. I hate to say it, but Natsuki and me, we have nothing in common. Brains, athleticism, personality, nothing. We don't understand each other at all. The smile didn't leave Akiba's face. That's just how it is, he concluded. If you bought that book from his bookshop, then shouldn't you be the one to go? His eyes was on the large volume that Sayo was holding. And by the way, he added, I had no idea that the esteemed vice captain of the Wind Ensemble Club was a connoisseur of vintage books. When I saw my classmate hole up in his bookshop reading, I thought I would like to try something too. But every time I open it... Sorry, just one moment. Oh, sorry, I had to pick up a phone call. I'm back. When I saw my classmate hole up in his bookshop reading, I thought I would try reading something too. But every time I open it, my shoulders get horribly stiff. There are so many words and so many pages. Jane Austen was a good choice, though. Akiba's tone changed slightly. It's a great introduction to literature, and it's aimed at women. Good for Natsuki. A soft light gleamed in Akiba's eyes. Damn it, thought Sayo, sighing to herself. When book lovers talked about books, their faces seemed to light up. A tad bewildered, she gripped her copy of Pride and Prejudice a little tighter. Okay, I'll leave the rest to you, Rin-chan. The sound of the engine almost drowned out his aunt's perky voice as her white Fiat 500 pulled away. It was dusk and the sun was slipping away, the clear blue winter sky turning deep shade of pink. Rintaro watched the little car disappear into the distance, cheerfully waving so as not to cause her any concern. The moment he saw it turn the corner and disappear, he let out a huge sigh. Please don't call me Rin-chan, auntie, he muttered. His aunt's voice still rang in his ears. Sorry. Rin-chan, you really need to get all your stuff packed and ready to move tomorrow, okay? Since his grandfather died, his aunt had been visiting him every day. Now she had decided his moving day. Rintaro had grown to like his optimistic aunt more than he expected to. She was charmingly plump with a short stature, and as she crammed herself into her tiny white Fiat, she reminded Rintaro of a friendly dwarf in one of his old picture books. She was she was an extremely efficient worker, and the clearing of his grandfather's room was already well on its way. You know, if you leave your life shut away in your room this way, it's like completely giving up, she had told him. Words that Rintaro knew were meant out of love. She knew she was right. He just couldn't hang around the bookshop forever. Eh, sorry. He knew she was right. He couldn't just hang out around the bookshop forever, but he found himself frozen in inaction. He had just seen his aunt off when he spotted the class rep on the other side of the road. It felt as if he had been rescued. What a rare sight! A hikikomori spotted in the outdoors. She came over, her customary spring in her step. On your way home from school? Not exactly. Absent again, aren't you? What the hell, Natsuki? Even though Sayo's gaze was cold, Rintaro found that he didn't mind being on its receiving end. He quickly changed the subject. That was my aunt, he said, looking up the road. She came to tell me to get ready for the move. The moving company is coming the day after tomorrow. Wow, that's soon. Sayo looked genuinely surprised. It's been almost a week since Grandpa died. I guess a poor little high school student like me can't be left alone forever. And yet, you act just like as if it's all happening to someone else. You're so calm about it. I'm not calm at all. Here you are again, stewing over things all alone, as usual. If you don't stop thinking for a moment, your brain is going to overheat. Sayo had pretty much nailed it. Rintaro grimaced. Well, at least this is the last time you'll have to deliver my homework to me. This isn't your homework, by the way. Sayo held up the book she was carrying. I really enjoyed it. It was Rintaro's turn to be surprised. You already finished it? Yep. Thanks to you, I read through it in 2 days. Barely slept. She pretended to be annoyed, but there was a trace of smile around her eyes. She looked towards the bookshop. Recommend me something else. If you're moving in 2 days, I had better buy a few of them. She went in without waiting for a reply. Rintaro hurried after her, but not 2 steps beyond the threshold he collided with her. Sayo stopped in her tracks. What's up? He asked, and he immediately saw what it was. Young love, Mr. Proprietor? Waiting inside was a certain large tabby cat with ginger fur and eyes of jade green. There was no trace of a smile on its face. It stood there in the central aisle under the bluish-white glow of the light that fell on the bookshelf. Good to see you have done nothing important. Oh my god. Good to see you have nothing important to do as usual, it continued. It so happens that I'm busy getting ready to move. That is an obvious lie. Clearly, you haven't even started. Having dismissed Rintaro's objection, the tabby cat turned to Sayo and bowed its head with great gallantry. It's a pleasure to meet you again. Thank you for taking such care of the proprietor here. You are very welcome, replied Sayo, obviously rather confused but enjoying the situation nevertheless. This was the kind of adaptability that made her an excellent class rep. I didn't expect to see you again. Would you have preferred not to? No. I was really happy to meet you. I had a wonderful time. The cat shook its whiskers in delight at Sayo's earnest response, but then quickly turned its jade eyes on Rintaro. She's a rather open-minded and charming young woman. Such a contrast to the back-looking conservative youngster before me, who can't even act on his own feelings. I won't deny that, but it doesn't mean that you are free to trespass in my shop. Every time you turn out without warning, it doesn't exactly fill me with glee, Rintaro said. No worries, said the cat casually. This will be the last time. The last? Right. The cat paused for a breath before continuing. I need your help again. And sip of coffee. This is the final labyrinth, said the tabby cat matter-of-factly. Once again, Rintaro and Sayo found themselves walking along the inexplicably endless central aisle of Natsuki books, its imposing stacks of books to either side of them and the lamps at intervals overhead. You have read many books so far. Thank you for that. Unusual coming from you. Rintaro was a little taken aback by the cat's lack of venom. Is this all in preparation for you leaving us? Partly. As if to object to the cat's roundabout answers, Rintaro's tone became bolder. I was surprised when you turned up out of thin air. Are you going to surprise me again now by suddenly disappearing? That's out of my paws. Cats are, by nature, creatures of will. They don't come and go at the convenience of human beings. At least, the other cats I know don't have such a sharp tongue as you. Such a naive young boy. There are plenty of cats just like me. The tabby didn't even bother to turn its head. Rintaro gave a pained smile. I'm going to miss the charming way with words. Don't get ahead of yourself. This is a conversation for after we have visited the next labyrinth. The tabby suddenly stopped and looked back at Rintaro. There's a seriousness in it to its gaze that Rintaro had not seen before. The master of the third labyrinth is kind of a pain in the ass. The cat turned its jade eyes on Sayo, who had been listening in silence. What? She asked, frowning slightly. Our final adversary is a little different from the ones we have already met. Are you trying to tell us that it's dangerous? Get us to turn back? The cat ignored the question and began to performatively wash its face. This adversary is extremely unpredictable. I'm sure that Mr. Proprietor here will be even more concerned for your safety. So now you're on Natsuki's side? Sayo asked. Most certainly not, the cat retorted. No? Your presence here blindsided me, but I can see now that it wasn't an accident. Sayo and Rintaro looked at each other. You are likely here for a reason, so my hope is that you will remain with us for our final journey. Hey, Rintaro was starting to panic. Ignoring him completely, the cat turned to Sayo and bowed its head. If anything happens to me, it said in its deep and powerful voice, please take care of Mr. Proprietor. Sayo was silent for a moment, but then responded with her trademark charming smile. So, you want my help? Mr. Proprietor is reasonably intelligent, but because he lacks courage, he tends to hesitate at the crucial moment. He is unreliable. I know what you mean. I am aware that I'm dissing him right in the front. Rintaro finally cut in. Look, Sayo, you don't have to go along with any of this. In the past I might not have, but now, Natsuki, I feel like if something happened to you, we'll both be in trouble. Taken aback at Sayo's words, Rintaro climbed up. Sayo winked at him mischievously. Because then I wouldn't get the book recommendation I came here for. Then the tabby chuckled. Splendid, it said. And with that, it spun back around and continued to walk ahead. Without hesitation, Sayo followed. Rintaro was left with no choice but to scurry to catch up with them. He was soon surrounded by the blinding white light. The scenery on the far side of the light was different again. The first thing they saw was a long, gently meandering passageway. Size-wise, it was the same as the one they had entered by, but in every other sense it was completely different. For one, there was a clear blue sky above. Unlike the dim lamp-lit aisle of the bookshop, this was an outdoor structure. The walls were much taller than Rintaro, so he couldn't see beyond either side of them, but the bright sunlight overhead made the place feel open and airy. However, there was one thing that didn't mesh with the peaceful atmosphere. It was Sayo who reacted at first. Ah! What are these? Her voice was shrill, almost a shriek. Although he didn't say anything, Rintaro was just as shocked. The walls on both sides of the passageway were made of stacks of books, but there was nothing neat or orderly about the piles. Some were torn, others crumpled, and the ones at the bottom were completely crushed by the weight of the upper books. There, there appeared to be no thought at all put into the stacking system, just tall piles of books reaching high into the sky. Even if you weren't a book lover like Rintaro, the sight would make anyone wince. Let's go. Everyone stopped gawping and got a hold of themselves, but there was nothing to say. The only way to express their current feelings was through silence. Rintaro and Sayo nodded at each other and started to walk. Making their way through the structure was like trying to find the exit for the most poorly designed modern art exhibit. Its passageway took erratic turns, and without clear view ahead, they soon lost all sense of direction. The decaying scenery was accentuated by all the more by the bright sunlight. They had no idea how far or how long they had been walking when they came to a giant grey wall blocking the passageway. Sayo let out a sigh that sounded like relief. A dead end? Is this it? Asked Rintaro, stopping and looking upward. The giant wall before them was full of countless square windows, and its top could not be seen, disappearing into the haze way overhead. Because of the walls of books on either side, it was hard to get the full picture. But the grey wall at the end of the passageway was possibly the site of a tall skyscraper. They advanced a few steps farther to see that it was indeed a tall grey building, with a large glass doorway at its base. There was a sign above the door marked entrance. I guess that means we should go in, said the cat, looking decidedly unimpressed. It headed straight for the door, which slid noiselessly open in welcome. A woman in a spotless lavender-colored suit appeared out of nowhere and bowed to the three visitors. Welcome to World's Best Books, the world's #1 publishing company. She had a perfectly mechanical voice to match her perfectly mechanical smile. She had she also had a lot of nerve introducing her own company as the world's #1. May I ask your names and the reason for your visit? Caught off guard by the fake cheeriness of her voice, Rintaro struggled to speak. All the mounds of books outside the building, what are they? He managed to ask. Outside the building? With that mechanical smile still anchored to her face, the woman tilted her head inquisitively about 30 degrees to the left. Rintaro couldn't help but being a little impressed with her precision. Outside this building, there are books that are being horribly. Oh my goodness! Were you walking outside? Said the woman, putting her hand to her heart, frowning with concern. I'm afraid that's terribly dangerous. I sincerely hope that you weren't harmed in any way. Rintaro began to feel incredibly weary, but the cat's calm voice was there to revitalize him. Stop this, Mr. Proprietor. This woman is not the one we have come to talk to. I suppose not, said Rintaro with a shrug. The woman repeated her original question. May I ask your names and the reason for your visit? The question was delivered without effect, but Rintaro took his time before replying. My name is Rintaro Natsuki. I'm here to meet with the president of the company, I guess. In response, in Rintaro's awkward explanation, she bowed her head and went over to the reception desk. She made a brief phone call and then came back and bowed once more. Thank you for waiting. The president will see you now. Right now? Of course. You've come all this way to visit him. She delivered the information and immediately set off, without waiting for Rintaro's response. Rintaro couldn't tell if things were going well or badly. He had no idea what the president's purpose was. Sorry. Or even whether he had any purpose at all, but at least he was free from the pointless exchange. He must be a very open-minded president to agree to meet with visitors who turn up unannounced this way, remarked Rintaro. What on earth are you blabbering about? Said Sayo in his ear. Company presidents are generally fat, balding men with nasty personality. Watch out! Slightly disturbed by Sayo's prejudiced statement, Rintaro followed the woman along the straight corridor. The floor beneath their feet was made of thick black granite, polished to such a sheen that they could see their own reflection. Along the center of the spotless gleaming floor ran a red carpet along which the woman now strode. After a while, she stopped suddenly and turned to look at the three visitors. From this point, you will be accompanied by a different guide. Indeed, a little farther along the red carpet stood a man in black suit. He gave an extremely low bow to Rintaro and the others. No bags or other hand luggage is permitted beyond this point, he said, his voice monotonous. It went without saying that nobody was carrying any kind of hand luggage. The man simply recited this line, then without doing any check, turned his back on the visitors and started walking. Rintaro and Sayo exchanged glances and set off after him. After a short while, they came across another man, this time wearing blue suit. The color of his suit was the only thing that differentiated him from the previous guide. This man also gave an exaggerated bow. No authority or business titles permitted beyond this point, he said, without so much as a flicker of his eyebrow. Having recited this line, just as the black-suited man had done before him, he turned his back and walked on. Is this some kind of a joke? Rintaro asked. The tabby cat's response was not very encouraging. I don't think they are the joking type around here. They followed the man in the blue suit until they came across the next man, this time in yellow. No malice or hostility is permitted beyond this point, they were informed. Rintaro was beginning to suspect that the cat was correct. They followed the yellow-suited man farther down the corridor until suddenly they emerged into a large open hall. Rintaro and Sayo cried out in surprise. The space was wide and cylindrical in shape, so high that the ceiling was out of sight. All around them, seemingly sprouting at random from the walls above, were hundreds of staircases, forming aerial walkways that crisscrossed and intertwined like spiders' web. It was like looking up at the detailed internal frame of some kind of spacecraft. Thank you for your patience, said the man in yellow suit. He gestured towards the middle of the hall, where the red carpet ended at the doors of an elevator. At the elevator stood a man in red suit. As Rintaro and the others approached, he bowed deeply. The elevator doors opened to reveal a glass-walled interior. The president is waiting for you, he said tonelessly. Please get in. Just as the three were about to board the elevator, the man in the red suit moved to block the tabby cat's path. He gave another ceremonious bow. I am sorry, but no dogs or cats are permitted beyond this point. The tabby cat remained perfectly calm. As Rintaro opened his mouth to protest, the cat silenced him with a sharp look. I told you it would be tricky this time, it said, turning to Sayo. I'm glad that you are here. I wouldn't be comfortable letting this one go on alone. I guess that must be why I'm here, said Sayo. She smiled, and the faint gleam of a grin seemed to pass through the cat's green eyes. But then, as if to disperse any show of sentiment, the voice of the man in the red suit rang out with force. Kindly press the button for the top floor. It turned out that there was in fact only one button in the elevator. There were a large panel with a single button, rather unnecessarily bearing the words top floor. In other words, there were no buttons to come back down. It looked like we'll just have to get this sorted out and then find our way back, said Rintaro with a sigh. He turned his attention to the tabby cat on the outside of the elevator. There was a moment of silence. I'll be going then, partner. I'm counting on you, Mr. Proprietor. Spurred on by the cat's confidence, Rintaro pressed the button. The doors sprang shut, and with a gentle shudder, the elevator began to move. The elevator shot up into one of the aerial corridors, leaving the cat and the man in red suit far below. It ascended with the increasing speed through like a three-dimensional geometric structure. There were intersecting lines all around. As far as the eye could see, the stairways stretched out in every direction, but there was not a soul to be seen. Perhaps it was a trompe-l'oeil painting. I am glad that didn't make us climb all those stairs, he muttered. What a pain that would have been. Sayo smiled. She knew Rintaro was attempting to bring some levity to the serious situation even though he wasn't very good at it. It is incredibly unsettling. Yeah, even a foul-mouthed, pointlessly pompous tabby cat is a better diversion than none at all. Their eyes met, and then they both giggled. Outside the elevator, it was getting gradually darker. Although they were inside a building, it was as if the sun were slowly setting. The intricate structure began to fade into the darkness, and as their vision was getting poorer, it became impossible to tell whether the elevator was still climbing or if it had come to a stop. At first, I didn't even care if I could get home again, Rintaro said quietly. Sayo didn't respond, but she turned to look at her friend. The first time the mysterious cat took me on the journey, he continued, I thought that it was all a dream. I wouldn't mind never waking up. And if it wasn't a dream, then I wouldn't mind not being able to ever make it home again. Rintaro adjusted his glasses. But ever since that cat turned up, I've been thinking more and more about everything that's been going on. I feel like I'm starting to see things a little differently. If this is what brings you out of your shell, it can only be a good thing, Sayo said. Rintaro smiled wryly. I'm passive, I'll admit, but I was really trying to keep you out of danger, he said. You know, Natsuki, sometimes you talk like you're trying out pickup lines. Is that a side effect of reading too many books? Okay, let me rephrase. I'm sorry for getting you involved in this mess. You don't have to apologize. I'm having a great time here. And you know what? It's fun to see a different side of you, Natsuki. Different how? Forget I said anything, she said, laughing it off. Sayo pictured Rintaro standing up to the white-coated scholar in that strange underground laboratory. It wasn't the first time she had gone back to that image, but Rintaro would never know that. Just as Rintaro was about to ask Sayo one more question, he felt the elevator slowing down to a stop. Once again, the door slid open noiselessly, revealing a dimly lit space beyond. It was almost impossible to make out the size or scale of the space because of how gloomy it was. However, a red carpet ran straight ahead, indicating where Rintaro and Sayo should go. At the far end was a heavy wooden door with a geometric pattern carved into it. There was something very intimidating about that door. Go on, Natsuki, if you're asking me to. You'll be fine. Rintaro wasn't feeling brave, but he was encouraged by Sayo's steady voice. You've got more guts than you think, Natsuki, especially when it comes to books. You've got nothing to be worried about at all. Even that kid Akiba is impressed by you. Rintaro was thrown by her mention of him. Akiba? Yeah, he was praising him at school the other day. He's a bit cocky for my liking, but he's honest. To Rintaro, those words were as refreshing as a clear winter sky. There's a warm feeling in the pit of his stomach that began to spread. It will be too much to call it courage, but it certainly came from the same place. All of a sudden, he felt Sayo punch him gently in the back. Just to make sure, just make sure you bring me back, Natsuki said. Natsuki. They stepped gingerly out onto the carpet. It would be a lie to say he wasn't nervous, but Rintaro kept his gaze straight ahead. Something told him that now was the time to act. He took a deep breath and kept walking. You really do like books, don't you? The voice of Ryota Akiba echoed in Rintaro's ears. Rintaro was only a junior, so he's not really had much to do with this charismatic senior. It was his usual habit to stay away from any other of the older students when they came by the bookshop. Akiba was a star player of the basketball team, a top academically in his year, and active in the student council. Rintaro, the hikikomori living shut in his grandfather's bookshop, was from another world. Rintaro had once asked Akiba in all seriousness why a successful student like him would bother visiting the lowly Natsuki books. Well, because you have good books, he, he replied, clearly puzzled by Rintaro's question. Your grandfather must be disappointed that you don't understand what a great place he has here. And with that, Akiba had begun to sing the shop's praises. There are books here that are considered masterpieces all over the world. They have endured for years until now. They are becoming more and more difficult to find in regular bookshops. But when I come here, I can find more or less anything I'm looking for. He rapped his knuckles on the bookshelf before him. I get that bookshops might not carry something as eclectic as Anderson or Johnson, but these days even stuff written by Kafka or Camus is out of print, and it's practically impossible to find a shop that stocks the complete works of Shakespeare's. Akiba paused as if to consider why that was. Because they don't sell, he concluded. Bookshops aren't volunteer organizations. They can't survive if they don't make sales, and that's why books that don't sell just disappear. That's why your grandpa's books shop really stands out. There's an incredible assortment of books here on the shelves, even if they are no longer bestsellers. In fact, they take pride in place. I mean, of course, it's because it's a used bookshop, but in here I can get my hands on anything but the absolute rarest of titles. As he spoke, he tapped on various bookshelves with his knuckles as if to emphasize his points. And on top of that, he added with a chuckle, you have here an expert to guide to all of these many difficult titles. A guide? Do you have a copy of Constance Adolph? I saw something about it online on the other day. It was supposed to be pretty good. I haven't been able to find it anywhere else. Rintaro nodded and reached over to the bookshelf towards the back of the shop. He put out an old worn book the size of a medium-length novel, Benjamin's Constant. His work is famous for psychological depiction of human behavior. It's pretty unique. I think it's written in France in the early 19th century. Instead of reaching for it right away, Akiba paused to give the book and Rintaro a strange look until he couldn't quite control his amusement any longer. He laughed in delight. You really do love books, don't you? That cheery laugh of his seemed out of place in Natsuki books. Welcome to World's Best Books. The booming voice greeted them as they ventured in through the tall, imposing door. They opened. The room beyond the door was large, about the size of a high school room. From the ceiling hung a grand chandelier, and below their feet a plush carpet that completely muffled all sounds of their footsteps, and the walls on four sides were covered with bright red curtains. At the far end of this luxuriously decorated room was a desk with a glossy sheen, behind which sat a thin, elderly gentleman with an impressive head of white hair. He was dressed in a three-piece suit and leaned back at ease in the black office chair, his hands resting on the desk. He regarded his three visitors calmly. "He's not what I expected," whispered Sayo. "It's weird for a company president not to be fat and balding. I bet he's just pretending to be the president. Maybe he's a mid-level manager working overtime." Rintaro grinned. He found her tactlessness fascinating. The man behind the desk raised his right hand. "Please come in. I'm the company's president," he said, gesturing towards a sofa. However, neither Rintaro or Sayo felt like sitting. The sofa was extremely expensive looking and covered with a thick layer of fur. The president didn't seem bothered by their refusal to sit. "I really do appreciate your coming all the way to visit me. I know it must have been a difficult journey. I'm so far from the entrance and the security is extremely tight here. Our good friend wasn't allowed to come with us." "Ah," said the president, narrowing his eyes. "I'm sorry about that. I'm afraid I hate cats." "Oh, you're not a cat person?" The kindly smile on the man's face suddenly faded and gave way to a sudden volley of words. "No, not a cat person in the slightest. I detest them, especially the cunning ones." The words flashed through the air like it's reflecting off a knife blade. The president may have sensed Rintaro stiffen, but he didn't show it. "I do apologize for the trouble that may have caused to my guests from Natsuki Books." "You know Natsuki Books?" "Sure I do," he said, stroking his narrow chin. "No doubt it's a shabby old used bookshop, self-satisfied and stuck in the past. You must have piles of old-fashioned, difficult, unsellable books all over." "Me, I'm envious. Sounding like running that store must be a walk in the park, free of any pressure or responsibilities." The president flashed them a big grin. "It was a surprise attack, a declaration of war." Sayo winced, but Rintaro was undaunted. From the moment he had set eyes on him, Rintaro knew there was something troubling this man. Perhaps the tabby cat was onto something. The president continued on, completely unperturbed. "I was fascinated to hear that I had visitors from such an antiquated old bookshop. It made me curious what kind of wild ravings they might share with me." "Well, you might want to rethink the decor of your office." "Decor?" the president asked. When he had said wild ravings, he hadn't expected cutting remarks. "Is this an office or a penthouse?" Rintaro continued. "These chandeliers are so glittery they give anyone a headache, and the carpet is so plush it's ridiculous. Such bad taste. Unless you're doing it for a joke, I would suggest redecorating it as soon as possible." The president's eyebrows moved slightly, but his smile didn't falter. Rintaro wasn't finished. "I'm sorry if I sound rude, but my grandfather always taught me that it's kindness to let someone know when their behavior is off, even if you antagonize them by doing so. And this room is so ugly, I can barely look at it." "Hey, Natsuki!" Sayo hurriedly intervened. Rintaro finally stopped talking, wondering what he had just gotten himself into. This aggressiveness was out of character for him. He much preferred a careful, reasoned approach, even if that meant playing it safe. After all, he valued moderate, constructive criticism. But the reason was clear to him. This time, Natsuki Books, the shop itself, was being ridiculed. The elderly president did not move for a moment, and then finally let out a small sigh. "Well, it seems I misjudged you. I had no idea there was a boy with such strong spirits at Natsuki Books. I don't know anything about spirits. I just love books." "I see." The president nodded generously and then seemed to think better of it. He shook his head instead. "Love books," he muttered to himself. "That's a problem." He reached out a skinny arm towards the large button on the desk. He clicked it, and all at once the red curtains on three sides of the office began to open. Bright sunlight streamed into the room. It took a while for Rintaro's eye to adjust the glare. so he didn't fully grasp the situation right off. Eventually, he could see that they were in a room at the top of a skyscraper with windows on all three sides. Beyond the windows, there was a view of several other similar skyscrapers. Something white was pouring from the window of the surrounding buildings and fluttering into the ground like snowflakes. One moment, please. As Rintaro's eyes adjusted to the light, he heard Sayo give a small shriek. Then, as he too realized what he was looking at, he gulped. The stuff that looked like snow cascading from the windows, hovering for each moment in the air, then tumbling to the ground below. Each and every piece was a book. Someone was throwing books from the windows. They were caught by the wind and scattered far and right. The building looked as if they were caught in a blizzard, but it wasn't the sky that was just filled with books. When Rintaro and Sayo looked down from the window, the view was staggering. There were grounds there on the grounds were hundreds of thousands of books piled up, a veritable print wasteland. As they looked on, stunned, they realized that some of the books were passing so close to the window that if they reached out, they could have touched them. That was when they realized that some of the books were being thrown from the same building they were standing in. "Do you know what that is?" asked the president with a smirk. "Not exactly, but I know I don't like the sight of it," replied Rintaro. "That's the new reality." Rintaro's heart dropped. "This building houses one of the largest publishing companies of our time. Every day we publish as many books as there are stars in the skies for the people down there. But that's as if you're spewing out wads of paper for no reason other than to increase the amount of waste. That's just how it goes," said the president nonchalantly. "We are a huge international publisher. Every day we produce mountains of books and sell them all over the world. With the profits we make from those sales, we fund the production of more books, which we sell. We sell more and more, and our profits steadily increase." The president fluttered his hand in a movement that mirrored the books passing the windows. Gold rings adorning his fingers flashed in the sunlight. Rintaro tried his best to comprehend the situation that the president was explaining, but it wasn't an easy task. Then he recalled the messy, disorganized piles of books they had seen on their way, the bizarre landscape, and the sight of thousands of books falling through the skies before him, coupled with the president's smooth voice. It all seemed to tie up his thoughts and drag him into a swamp of confusion. Now he understood why the woman at the reception desk had been so concerned about the danger of walking outside, he thought bitterly. "You've got to be joking," he said. "Books aren't meant to be thrown. They are made to be read." "You are so naive." The president picked up a book at random from his desk. "Books are expendable goods. It's my job to make sure that they are consumed in the most efficient way possible. I couldn't do this job if I was some bookworm. Anyhow," he abruptly spun his black chair around, pushed open the window closest to him, and tossed the book that he was holding straight out of the window. The book hung in the air for a moment as if there was something it had suddenly remembered, and then quickly disappeared out of view. "This is what we do here." Rintaro suddenly understood that what the tabby cat had meant when it said adversary would be different from the first two. The men he had met in the two labyrinths, no matter how bizarre their behavior, were at heart book lovers. By contrast, the man sitting in front of them right now didn't feel the slightest attachment to books. He treated them as trash and didn't feel even the teeniest bit bad about it. This was what the cat had meant when it said the man was extremely unpredictable. "Natsuki, are you okay?" It was Sayo's voice. Rintaro turned to look at her in And Rintaro turned and met her intense gaze. He nodded and turned back to the man in the office chair. I came here today because a friend asked me to rescue some books. Rescue? That's right. I think that means I have to stop you. Well, that's a stupid thing to say. I've already told you that this is my job. But you're treating books as if they are nothing but scraps of paper. If that's the attitude of the people producing books, then nothing will reach the readers. The numbers of people who read books is already decreasing. If someone in your position has that kind of attitude, then the number of readers will just keep going down. Rintaro put forth his best argument, but the president was unmoved. Beneath his white eyebrows, his eyes were unreadable, and the slight curve of a smile on his lips simply added to his elusive air. After a moment, his narrow shoulders vibrated ever so slightly. Then the vibrations turned into a stronger shaking, and then finally, the president exploded with laughter. His low-pitched chuckling filled the room. As Rintaro and Sayo stared, the president pressed his left hand to his mouth as if try to suppress his laughter. He rapped a couple of times on the desk and the knuckles of his with the knuckles of his right. Finally, he began to speak. You really are an idiot, are you? Utterly dumb. Even while he was crackling with laughter, there was a bite to his words. No. In fact, I don't think it's fair to call you an idiot. You are far from being the only one. These misconceptions are all too common these days. What misconceptions? Rintaro asked. The one that books don't sell. The president laughed one more time and then continued. You are deluded if you think books don't sell anymore these days. Books sell really well. In fact, World's Best Books is extremely successful. Is that supposed to be sarcasm? It's not sarcasm at all. In fact, it is very easy indeed to sell books as long as you keep one fundamental rule in mind. The president regarded Rintaro with amusement. It was clear that he was enjoying himself, as if revealing the secret of an amazing magic trick. He lowered his voice to a whisper. Sell books that sells. That's the rule. A curious phrase indeed. A curious phrase that had a bizarre ring to it. That's right, said the president. Here, at the world's number one publishing company, we don't publish books to inform or teach other people. We print the books that society wants. We don't care about issues such as messages that need to be imparted or philosophy that needs to be handed down to the next generation. We care about any harsh reality or difficult truth. Society isn't interested in things like that. Publishers don't have to worry about what they should be telling the world. They need to understand what the world wants to hear. It's dangerous to be that cynical. And you have an excellent mind to have noticed that it is cynical. Chuckling, the president took a cigarette from a pack on his desk and calmly lit it. And yet, that's the reality. That's how we manage to turn on a steady profit. Beyond the purplish curl of smoke, countless books went tumbling to the ground. If you are raised in that Natsuki Books fantasy line, then you should know this. In today's world, people don't have the time or the money to spend on literary masterpieces or any fabulously long tome. But at the same time, reading is still fashionable. It confers status. Everyone wants to brag about reading some difficult book, and so we publish our works with these people's needs in mind. In summary, he stuck his neck out to emphasize his point. Cheap digests and abridged versions sell like crazy. He roared with laughter, his shoulders trembling. For those readers who desire a bit of stimulation, the best way to do it is do it with pornographic passages or gratuitous violence. And for those who lack imagination, adding a simple "this really happened" does the trick. Your circulations is increased by several percentage points, and sales roar. Rintaro felt sick to his stomach. And for those who never actually pick up a book, whether they can't get their hands on one or can't be bothered to read, we produce information arranged by bullet points. Titles like The 5 Requirements for Success or The 8 Techniques to Get Ahead in Life. People never catch on what they are being duped. Those books like these are never going to help them get ahead. But the important thing is that my goal is of selling books is accomplished. Stop it, Rintaro said. No, I'm not done yet. There was no emotion whatsoever in the president's voice. The room temperature suddenly dropped several degrees. A chill ran through Rintaro. Although his forehead had broken and broke out in sweat, the president adjusted his chair and watched Rintaro from an angle. There's a big difference between the books you value and the ones that the rest of the society wants, he said with a pity in his eyes. Think back. Did you ever really have customers at Natsuki Books who even reads Proust or Romain Roland nowadays? Would anyone cough up their hard-earned money to buy books like those? You know, what most readers are looking for in a book? Something easy, cheap, and exciting. We have no choice but to adapt the forms of books to suit those readers' tastes. That's really. Then, in that case, Rintaro searched desperately for the right words. Books just keep losing weight. Books losing weight? That's an interesting way to putting it. But poetic turns of phrase don't help with book sales. That's not all about sales. At least my grandpa believed in what he did and kept true to his belief till the end. So we should stock books that don't sell well, so that world's best book can die along the with all the world's greatest works of literature, just like Natsuki Books did. Rintaro glared back at the president. Glaring was all he could do. Rintaro glared back at the president. Nobody interested in truth or ethics or philosophy. People are worn out from living. All they want is either to be stimulated or healed. The only way for books to survive in such a world is for them to metamorphose. Dare I say it, sales are everything. No matter how great a masterpiece, if a work doesn't sell, it vanishes. Rintaro felt slightly dizzy and put his hand to his forehead. He touched the rim of his glasses, but as usual, no coherent thought came to him. The words he was hearing were far too beyond anything he could have imagined. He knew he could talk to his heart's content about the value and appeals of books, but to this man before him, books had a completely different value, one that Rintaro had never considered. This man lived in a whole other world. It's okay, Natsuki. It was Sayo's voice. He felt her strong presence by his side. Sayo had stepped up and had taken a firm grip of his left arm. You are okay. I don't feel okay though. But you are. She glared at the man behind the desk. Everything he's saying is wrong and I'm certain of it. Yeah, but his logic makes sense. This isn't about logic, she said decisively. I don't know anything about that. What I can say is that he sounds like he doesn't even believe half the things he's telling you. Rintaro turned his head to look at Sayo. And in that moment, he recalled the tabby's words. This labyrinth runs on the power of truth, but not everything he says is true. There's got to be a lie in there somewhere. Yes, that's right, thought Rintaro. He had been overwhelmed by how extreme the man's words had been, but something about them didn't quite add up. Once again, Rintaro reached up and touched his glasses frame. Thinking won't help you, Rintaro Natsuki, said the president serenely, his words accompanied by a thick cloud of cigarette smoke. You're still young. There are realities of life that you don't want to accept. I, on the other hand, am intimately familiar by how the world works. Your feelings about a book don't determine its value. The number of copies in circulation does. In other words, in our society, it is the banknote that is the arbiter of value. Those who forget this rule and try to embrace something idealistic have no shame but to drop out of society altogether. It's truly a shame. The president spoke like a teacher. His speeches resembled sermons. It was blatant It was a blatant attempt to gaslight Rintaro, to throw his chain of thought out of whack. However, Saya's grip on his arm was firm, as if to offer support. As the president quietly chuckled to himself, Rintaro thought furiously. He thought, and then finally stepped forward. The president's laughter and his thick cigarette smoke had formed a kind of a fog in the air, but Rintaro seemed to cut his way through the fog. He didn't falter. It's true that Natsuki Books isn't your average second-hand bookshop. Rintaro looked at his formidable adversary behind his grand desk. We don't have any customers, and we don't sell that many books, but it's a very special place. Hello, Cardinal. Yes, there's a word for that. Despair, said the president, shaking his head. And it's the perfect word for my current state of mind. Really, your personal sentiments are no concern to me. But it's not personal. Every customer who came in the door felt the same way I do. The little used bookshop was filled with my grandfather's thoughts and feelings. Anyone who stepped over the threshold could feel them, and that's what made it special. Well, that's vague. Nobody's going to be convinced by an abstract argument like that. Would you mind being a bit more specific with your grandfather's thoughts and feelings? I don't need to explain it to you. I know because I'm just like you. Rintaro's word, delivered very quietly, had the power to stop the president in his tracks. He didn't move again for a while. The plume of smoke that rose from between his fingers gradually thinned and then finally petered out. Hello, Susro. Eventually, he narrowed his eyes slightly and opened his mouth. I don't know what you mean by that. That's another lie. The president's eyebrows twitched. You said just now that books are expendable goods. You claim your job is impossible to do if you love books. That is correct. That is a lie. Rintaro's voice was blunt. A line of ash fell from the president's cigarette. You said it just now. Books needs to metamorphose if they are to survive. If you really just saw books as expendable goods, you would never have said that. Where are you? That is a questionable line of reasoning. It's all about the nuances. If you really think of books as nothing but scraps of papers, then you ought to quit this job. But I hear from you that you are committed to changing the form of books so they will survive. That means you like books. Oh, I see you. That's why you are still sitting there like my grandfather. Come in, sit down, silly boy, girl. Rintaro's voice trailed off into a heavy silence. The room remained silent apart from the occasional swish of a book falling past the window, but there were fewer than before. The president regarded Rintaro a while and then spun his chair around to observe the bleak. The cat has been meowing non-stop. Well, they are different modes, just so you know. You can try them out if you want to. Rintaro's voice. But there are fewer than before. The president regarded Rintaro for a while, then spun his chair around to observe the bleak landscape beyond the windows. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what I think. We have to face the reality. Books are getting thinner and thinner, and people are flocking to them, and then books need to respond to the demands of the flocks. No one can stop the cycle. And isn't Natsuki Books proof of this? No matter how special or welcoming the atmosphere, the number of customers won't go up. Am I wrong? Not true. Sayo's voice made its way through the stuffy air of the room like a fresh breeze. Natsuki's book's customer base isn't dying. For example, we have Akiba. He doesn't have the greatest personality, but he's extremely smart. And there's me. I've also become a regular. It wasn't exactly something to shout from the rooftops, but Sayo stood there with unwavering pride. Fine, said the president, but the amount of business just isn't profitable. If you're not selling, then it's meaningless. Bookshops aren't charities. Well then, Rintaro cut in, exactly how much profit do you need to make? How much? The president's eyes widened at the unexpected question. My grandpa used to say once you got thinking about money, there was no end to it. If you have 1 million yen, then you want two. If you have 100 million yen, then you want 200. So better to stop focusing on money and talk instead of instead about the book we read today. Like you, I believe that bookshops need to turn a profit, but I do know that there are things just as important as making money. Rintaro was no longer trying to persuade or win argument. He was simply speaking from the heart. If you're a producer of books, you should never call them expendable goods. One second, my cat is being insane. Can you please? Why? No! 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 Don't, don't interrupt me when I'm reading. Rintaro was no longer trying to persuade or win an argument. He was simply speaking from the heart. If you are a producer of books, you should never call them expendable goods, no matter how much things don't go as you hope. You should shout, I love books from the rooftops. Don't you agree? The president screwed his eyes as if dazzled by the light. Even if I were to say that, would it make any difference? Of course it would, replied Rintaro, quick as a flash. But if I admit I love books, how will I be able to publish ones that I don't like? The president's eyes widened slightly and the corners of his mouth twitched. It took a moment for Rintaro and Sayo to realize that he was smiling. They also noticed that at some point the books had stopped falling. Everything was quiet. Time stood still. With that approach, you're going to have a hard life ahead of you, said the president finally. Welcome, welcome. Please take a seat. Even if I were to say that, would it make any difference? Of course it would, replied Rintaro. Wait, hang on. With that approach, you're going to have a hard life ahead of you, said the president finally, looking at Rintaro straight in the eyes. Rintaro did not look away. Sitting behind the desk calling books expendable goods, I would call that hard life. Would you, now? As the president murmured those words, the door to the room opened and the woman from the reception desk entered. It's about time, she said, and the president raised a hand to cut her off. She stepped back out again. The president paused for a moment and then indicated the door through which she had just exited. It slid open, this time to reveal the red carpet that led back to the elevator. Not a word was exchanged. Rintaro looked at Sayo, and the two turned to leave. They had barely taken a few steps when the president finally spoke. I wish you the very best of luck. Rintaro turned back to look at the man behind the desk. It was difficult to read any emotion in the light of his eyes. He waited a beat. You too. The president too. The president was probably not expecting this response. His eyes widened, and this time the corners of his mouth clearly curved upwards. Rintaro caught a glimpse of the most unexpected grin. Good morning, good afternoon. Please take a seat. Thanks. The tabby cat, padding noiselessly through the rows of books, looking back over its shoulder at Rintaro and Sayo. Looks like you did good. I didn't know about that, but the president did smile as he sent us on our way. That's good enough. The cat nodded. The bluish light, countless books filling the space on both sides, the lamps hanging overhead. The bizarre scene had become a familiar one to them. They were on their way home, led through the strange corridor of books by the tabby cat. After a brief words of thanks, the cat continued in silence. The very fact that it wasn't talking spoke volumes. So you said it is the last labyrinth would end, ventured Rintaro. That's right, said the cat as it came to a halt. They were in Natsuki books, almost as if the whole long trip had been an illusion. The way back had been simple and short. After walking them to the heart of the shop, the cat turned nimbly around and headed back to the aisle. It hadn't bothered to say goodbye. Are you going? Rintaro spoke up. Yes, I'm afraid I have to. The cat turned and bowed deeply. Thanks to you, many, many books have been freed. I'm truly grateful. The cat remained in a humble pose, his head lowered, backlit by the bluish-white glow. It was a strange sight, but the emotion of the cat expressed was sincere. You have vanquished the inhabitants of three labyrinths with your own power. My work here is done. Sayo jumped in. What do you mean done? Won't we see you again? No, we can't meet. There's no longer a need. But, Sayo began, turning to Rintaro in bewilderment. Rintaro let out a deep sigh. If this is really goodbye, then there's something I want to say first, he said. Go ahead, replied the kid. Say whatever you want, a complaint, a parting shot at me, whatever. I just want to say thank you, that's all. Rintaro bowed. Both Sayo and the tabby cat seemed surprised. Hold on, was that sarcasm? Of course not, said Rintaro, a wry grin on his face. I'm not as dumb as you think, you know. Not as dumb as I think, said the cat, looking at Rintaro suspiciously. You came to me saying you needed to free some books and that you needed my help, but I think your ghost was really something else. The cat didn't stir, just fixed Rintaro with its jade eyes. The day I lost my grandfather, I couldn't care less what happened to me. My mom and dad were gone, and now I had lost my grandpa too. It was all so unfair, and I was just so sick and tired of everything. And then you turn up. He scratched his little head a little shyly. If you had not, I definitely wouldn't be standing here with a smile on my face. I was supposed to help you, but you are the one who helped me. Rintaro looked at the cat and took a deep breath before continuing. I shut myself away in the shop, but you forced me out of it. Thank you. Shutting yourself away in the bookshop is fine, and the cat said the cat in its rich, deep voice. But what worried us more was that you would retreated, you, sorry, was that you would retreated into your own shell. Hello, come have a seat. Thank you for coming. My shell? Please do come out of it. The cat spoke quietly, but its voice resonated in the pit of Rintaro's stomach. Don't give in to loneliness. You aren't alone. You have many friends looking out for you. Its parting words were heartfelt, encouraging. Rintaro fought off the questions that came to his head and simply looked back in silence. Only a few days had gone since his grandfather had passed away, and yet, thanks to this strange cat, somehow he had been able to find some light in the darkness of his misery. That had been the cat's true gift. Thank you, Rintaro repeated. Good manners, said the cat with a chuckle. The cat flashed him one last smile, bowed gracefully, and then slipped away down the bookshop aisle. As it was enveloped in the light, it began to scamper away in full speed. Sayo and Rintaro watched it disappear without glancing back. The figure of the cat dissolved into the soft blue light and was replaced by the old wooden back wall of the bookshop. Although there wasn't a single customer in sight, the doorbell rang once, bright and clear. The final labyrinth. One moment for a sip of coffee. Thank you for being here with me today. Today we are reading The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Matsukawa. We are on the chapter called The Final Labyrinth, as the second last chapter, basically. If you hear some purring or a cat meowing, that is my cat in the background. He's sitting on my lap and being very, very sticky, like a mochi. So I'm trying to give him attention while I'm reading. Hope you guys don't mind. Rintaro tipped the white teapot, and immediately the aroma of assam tea rose from the well-used Wedgwood teacup. He added a single sugar cube and a plenty of milk, then took a silver spoon and gently stirred. Watching the splash of milk gently circle the cup and become absorbed into the tea, he nodded with satisfaction. I've gotten really good at this, brewing tea that is. It has been his grandfather's habit to make himself a cup of tea after cleaning up the bookshop every morning. Rintaro had followed the same routine for the past week and was beginning to feel very comfortable in it. Rin-chan! A high-pitched voice in the direction of the door. Rintaro looked up to see the round, friendly face of his aunt. It's moving day. Are you ready? Oh. Thank you so much for the follow. Hey, we are at what? 156 or something. Sorry, I can't see properly. But thank you. Thank you for the follow. Thank you for the follow. Truly appreciate it. Okay. She's still calling me Rin-chan, he thought. With a smile, he put down his cup and headed for the door. Dressed in a white apron, Rintaro's aunt seemed more approachable than ever. She must have been over 50, but her air and mannerism were those of a younger woman. Outside the sky was cloudy, but somehow the air was bright, not only in contrast to the dimly lit shop, but also because Rintaro's aunt always managed to bring a sunny disposition with her that warmed any chill. Will the moving truck be arriving this afternoon, aunt? Ah, stop calling me that, Rin-chan, she replied. When you speak formally like that, my shoulders go all stiff. Rintaro saw his aunt Fiat 500 parked outside, and the image of her stuffing into that tiny car made him smile. I'm going shopping. Wonder if you wanted anything. They walked out together, easing herself back into the car. She added, I'll be back by midday, don't worry. I'll bring you some lunch. Make sure you are ready. Rintaro smiled and nodded at this rapid succession of statements. As she got ready to drive away, she suddenly stopped and looked up at him. There's something different about you, Rin-chan. You know, I was really worried about you when I saw you at the funeral. It looked as if you're going to fade away. But it turns out that you're stronger than I thought. I'm holding up, said Rintaro, with the most cheerful expression that he could muster. Not perfectly, of course, but I'm about as fine as I could be. His aunt smiled. Then suddenly, look up at the sky, he exclaimed, Oh! Rintaro followed her gaze and opened his eyes slightly. It's snowing, she said. Fluffy white snowflakes fluttered down around them. There was no sunshine, but the glittering flakes make everything seem bright. Passerby stopped to look up at the sky. I love it when it snows. It's so exciting. Rintaro's aunt always spoke spontaneously like this. She turned to Rintaro, her voice high and girlish. I'll buy you a cake tonight, Rin-chan. A cake? Why? Well, it's Christmas Eve, isn't it? Rintaro was genuinely surprised. Ever since his grandfather had passed away, he had lost track of the calendar. He looked around at the street and realized that the trees and the eaves of the house were decked out in colored lights. It was as if all the people and the houses they lived in were excitedly preparing for Christmas, while Rintaro and Natsuki Books alone were opting out. Or, are you planning to spend the evening with that lovely girlfriend of yours? I don't have a girlfriend. I'm just teasing. Rintaro's aunt revved up the engine. See you later! With one cheerful laugh, she drove away. Rintaro looked up and down the street. Delivery bikes were passing groups of high school students on their way to the morning club activities. He didn't associate any particular feelings or memories with Christmas Eve, but he did feel emotional as he realized that this would be the last time to enjoy this particular scene. Even the falling snow seemed to be meaningful. He stood for a while and took it all in. Only 10 days had passed since his grandfather's death, a short period of time, and yet it felt long to Rintaro because of all the strange events that had happened to him since. And of all those events, the thing that had stuck in his mind was the way the tabby cat had smiled at him right before it left for good. It was 3 days ago. He had last seen that fluffy tiger stripes. Since then, the days had flown by as he prepared for the move. The cat had not shown up again, and the back wall of the bookshop had remained just as it was. It always was. Sayo had dropped by each day, both on her way to and from school, to drink a cup of tea with Rintaro and to discuss the Stendhal novel that she was currently reading. But he reckoned she was probably more curious about the cat's whereabouts, and of course Rintaro himself would be lying if he said he wasn't curious himself. But time is merciless in its passing. This was something that Rintaro understood all too well. No matter how sad, how painful, or how nonsensical a thing might happen, time refused to stand still and wait for him. Somehow, he drifted along until where he was today. Eventually, Rintaro composed himself and headed back into the bookshop. He started to put away the tea things, but then suddenly stopped in his tracks. The back of the bookshop was bathed once again in bluish light. And right there, with its back to the light, sat a large tabby cat. "It's been a while, Mr. Proprietor." Rintaro's shock eventually gave way to a wry smile. "It's only been 3 days." "Really? Has it? Am I supposed to welcome you back?" No need no need to stand on ceremony." The cat turned its jade eyes from bluish light. "I need your help." Behind the cat, the light began to intensify, revealing rows upon rows of books. "Just one last time." As always, the cat's speech and action were abrupt, with no greetings or explanation. There was no hint of celebration at their reunion. "I thought we were saying goodbye." "Things have changed. We have to enter the labyrinth again." The cat's tone of voice was as nonchalant as ever, but there was a tension behind it that hadn't been there before. "What's going on?" "A fourth labyrinth has materialized." "A fourth one?" "Yes. This was an unforeseen situation. I'm going to need your help again, but..." Its tones changed. "Our next adversary is on another level. A whole new ball game." The cat's voice was blunt and imperious as ever, but it lacked the usual edge. It was a sign that something was amiss. "If they're that tough, are you sure you want me to help?" "It has to be you. They asked for you specially." "The opponent has?" "It's a tricky one. This time, there's a real possibility of never coming back, but you'll work it out somehow." The cat almost sounded as if it were pleading with him. "Got it," said Rintaro simply. "Let's go." His reply took the cat by surprise. It took a while to respond. Its green eyes observed the boy keenly. "You heard me, right? I said it's dangerous. I also heard you say that it would be different from everything until now. We might not be able to get back home. And you're still prepared to come?" "You are in trouble. That's enough for me," Rintaro said. The tabby cat looked as if it had just seen a ghost in broad daylight. "Are you feeling well, Mr. Proprietor?" "I'll go." "But..." "I wanted to thank you. I did tell you as much, but I haven't actually done anything to repay your kindness. This is the perfect chance." There was a brief pause as the tabby cat stared at Rintaro a while, and then it nodded with more emotion than it ever shown before. "I appreciate the help. Just," added Rintaro, "I want to set out immediately." He hurried over to the front door of the shop, closing and locking it right away. It's about time Sayo comes over. If she hears us talking, she'll want to come with us. I don't want to get her involved, Rintaro smiled, especially if it's going to be more dangerous. The cat accepted his concern in silence before gazing at Rintaro with an unusually stern expression. Unfortunately, she's already involved. In the awkward silence that followed, Rintaro stopped what he was doing and raised an eyebrow. A passing cyclist rang their bell as they passed in front of the shop. The cat began to speak. Sayo Yuzuki has been taken. She's locked up in the deepest part of the labyrinth. Rintaro froze. Did you hear me, Mr. Proprietor? I don't understand. What's not to understand? Sayo has been kidnapped. Our last quest goes beyond saving books. The cat looked sharply at Rintaro. We are on a mission to rescue your friend. Thank you, Adam. Ohayou gozaimasu. Good morning. Welcome. Rintaro shifted his eyes towards the passageway that led out of the back of the shop, a long, straight aisle, packed with books, illuminated by the eerie blue glow. Why? From within Rintaro emerged a sickening dread. You're not coming to school, are you? 2 days previously, early in the morning, Sayo had said those words to him. She had popped up unusual on her way to band practice. She was irritated to find Rintaro once again skipping school, sitting at the cash desk with his cup of morning tea. They chatted for a while, but Rintaro couldn't remember what about. Just chit-chat, probably, about books, about tea, and a little about the cat. Afterward, just as she was leaving for her practice, she had turned around. Hello. Welcome, welcome. Afterward, just as she was leaving for her practice, she had turned around. You can't stay shut away here forever. I know there's plenty of stuff that's not worth the effort, but this is your life. She broke off and then continued in a softer voice. You need to you need to hold your head high and step out on your own. It was typical advice of a class rep, but he also knew it was Sayo's way of comforting him about the move. Rintaro had appreciated her encouragement. He narrowed his eyes. Burned into his retina was the sight of her hand waving goodbye to him that very morning. It's strange, he said as he followed the cat down the long aisle of books. I've never been so worried about another person in my life. The cat threw him a glance but didn't say anything. The corridor seemed longer than the last time. It was hard to tell whether it was just Rintaro's imagination or something else entirely. Why did they take Sayo? If they wanted me, why didn't they just take me in the first place? No idea, replied the cat bitterly. You have to ask them yourself. I guess they thought the key to getting through to you was the girl. What are you talking about? It's obvious, isn't it? That girl cares about you. The cat said, staring straight ahead. She's always worrying about her gloomy classmate. That's because Sayo's responsible. She has to be. She's the class rep and she's a good neighbor. I don't know if this will be any of help to you, the cat interrupted, but I can tell you one thing. When the girl first came to the bookshop, I told you that certain people were able to see me under special conditions. I wasn't talking about supernatural powers or anything like that. This time, the cat stopped and turned to face Rintaro. All it takes is compassion. Compassion? Rintaro said, dumbfounded. Being able to express shallow words of sympathy in a sweet voice doesn't make someone a caring, compassionate soul. What's important is the ability to have empathy for another human being, to be able to feel their pain, to walk alongside them in their suffering. The cat resumed walking, and Rintaro scrambled as usual to keep up with his pace. That's not special or unusual power, the cat continued. It's a natural ability that everyone possesses, but the problem is that most people have lost touch with that ability in the hustle and bustle in their daily lives. Like you have? Rintaro speechless. In our stifling daily lives, we are also occupied with ourselves that we stop thinking about others. When a person loses their heart, they can't feel another pain. They lie, they hurt others, use weaker people as stepping stones to get ahead. They stop feeling anything. The world has become full of those kind of people. As if in reaction to the cat's shift in tone, the corridor began to change. The simple wooden bookcases, the, sim- the simple wooden bookcases that line its wall gradually turned into heavy, inlaid oak shelves, and the corridor itself began to expand, the ceiling rising, and the walls receding until it was wide enough for 5 or 6 people to walk side by side. The overhead lamps disappeared and the place was lit instead of a row of candles set out at intervals on the floor. Along its center, one human boy and one cat walked for a while in silence. And yet, in a world so apparent beyond redemption, sometimes someone like Sayo comes along. It's impossible to fool someone with a heart like hers. That girl wasn't helping you out of some kind of duty. She was genuinely concerned for your well being. The flames of the candles swayed slightly, although there wasn't a single breath of wind. Now the cat had put it into words. Rintaro realized it was true. She thought about all the times Sayo had come back to Natsuki books. All of a sudden, each scene took on a greater significance in his mind. If you are worrying about her right now, that means you are finding your own heart again. You're not just thinking about yourself, but you're feeling compassion for others. Compassion for others? That friend of yours is a little too good for a wimp like you, the cat said with a hint of amusement. Rintaro looked up. Far above a gently curving vaulted ceiling with the beauty and serenity of a classic old church dome. There's so much that I think I understand, but actually I don't, Rintaro said. The fact that you are already aware of that is the first step. I do feel a little braver. A little won't be enough. The cat lowered its voice. The final opponent is truly formidable. Barely had it finished speaking, the gigantic wooden double door appeared before them. It looked too heavy for Rintaro's feeble arms to handle, but as they approached, it began to creak its way open. Both sides slowly opened to reveal an expanse of lush green grass beyond. Leafy trees stretched up into the sky and white fountains dotted the landscape. Each fountain was adorned with statues, and the neatly trimmed hedges contrasted beautifully with the geometric paving stones laid out beneath. Rintaro and the cat were standing on the wide patio with a porch roof over their heads, looking out all over this. On each side of them, a stone paved path sloped gently away into the garden. It felt as if they had stumbled into the grounds of a massive Western style medieval mansion. Quite the elaborate design, the cat murmured, just as a rattling sound came from their right. They looked over and saw a carriage drawn by 2 horses approaching along the pathway. The carriage stopped before them, and the elderly coachman climbed down from the driver's seat. Wordlessly, he bowed to the two of them and opened the carriage door. I suppose you want us to get in, the cat, jumping right in without waiting for an answer. The elderly driver remained with his head bowed until Rintaro followed suit. The interior was surprisingly spacious and upholstered in red velvet. Rintaro and the cat seated themselves facing each other. The door shut with a clack, and after a moment's pause, it began to move. What's all this about? Said Rintaro. I think it's all to welcome you. I'm afraid I don't know anyone who would want to welcome me quite this way. Even if you don't know them, they certainly know you. You are quite the celebrity in this world. This world? And its ruler is a very special being. They possessed incredible powers. Wow. So I ought to be moved to tears that I've been invited here? Should I thank them for kidnapping my friend or something? The cat gave a small laugh. That's a good approach. Logic and reasons are never the best weapon in an irrational world. Humor is, right? As Rintaro spoke, the carriage lurched and picked up speed. They were on a major road right now. She looked out of the window to see the vast garden rolling past. Sunshine, breeze, splashing fountains, everything was pleasant, but at the same time, there was something uncanny. Rintaro could detect no signs of life, and by that he didn't mean human life only. There were no birds, no butterflies, no sign of anything that sustained this world. In other words, it doesn't matter how beautifully it was dressed up, this place was not real. This will be the last time I ever speak to you, said the cat. Rintaro turned his gaze from the scenery outside to look at his companion. Sensual senpai, welcome. Oh, Piao. Okay, you're here. Rintaro. Rintaro turned his gaze from the scenery outside to look at his companion. That's not the first time I've heard that from you. Try to focus on yourself. Perched on the old-fashioned carriage seat, the cat turned its jade green eyes to stare straight into Rintaro's. This time, really, will be the last. Well, I have a bunch of questions for you before you go. The cat stared at him. Rintaro paused for a moment and then laughed awkwardly. The thing is, I have no idea where to start. The light that fell on its face gradually turned the cat's fur into deep crimson. Outside the carriage, daylight was quickly fading from dusk to night. The interior began to sink into gloom. Rintaro looked up and saw the stars had already begun to twinkle in the night sky. Suddenly the cat spoke. Books have soul. Its beautiful eyes seemed to capture the light of the stars, and they too twinkle in the darkness. Thank you! Thank you for the follow, thank you! A book that sits on a shelf is nothing but a bundle of paper. Unless it is open, a book possessing great power or an epic story is mere scraps of paper. But a book that has been cherished, loved, and filled with human thoughts has been endowed with a soul. A soul? That's right, replied the cat emphatically. These days, people rarely pick up books anymore, nor do they infuse with their thoughts. Books are gradually losing their souls, but there are still a few people like you and your grandfather who love books with every fiber of their being. You really listen to your message. The cat slowly turned its head and looked up at the starry sky. You are truly a valuable friend to all of us, it added. It was a curious thing to say, but each word sank deeply into Rintaro's heart. The cat's eyes gleamed, noble, confident to the point of arrogance, and yet beautiful, an amazing cat. You know, I feel as if I've known you for a long time, said Rintaro. The cat didn't turn its head, but its pointed ears twitched as if to encourage the boy to continue. A really long time, back when I was a little boy. Rintaro looked up at the carriage roof as if searching for memory. I met you once in a story. I think it was one my mother read to me. Books have souls, repeated the cat softly. A cherished book will always have a soul. It will come to its reader's aid in times of crisis. The calm, measured voice warmed Rintaro's heart. He looked over and saw the cat faintly smiling. I told that you weren't alone. The cat carrying the two friends raced on through the night. Through the windows, starlight fell on its velvet interior. Spotlighted by the pale light, the cat's smile abruptly faded and eyes flashed. However, a book with a soul is not always an ally. Rintaro frowned. Is this about Sayo? I'm talking about this last labyrinth. The cat turned back. you for coming. Thank you. Is this about Sayo? I'm talking about this last labyrinth. The cat turned back to the window. Rintaro followed its gaze. The stars in the sky shone lustrous and beautiful, but they seemed to be arranged completely at random. He couldn't make out a single familiar constellation. Just as a person's soul can be warped by suffering, so can the soul of a book. A book that has been in the hands of a person with twisted soul will also acquire a twisted soul. And together they ran amok. A book's soul can be warped? The cat nodded emphatically. Older books, particularly those that have a long history, have been influenced by the minds and souls of a great many people. Those books become imbued with a tremendous power, whether it be good or evil, and when the soul of such a book becomes distorted, the cat sighed. Well, it ends up wielding a power far greater than I or any other ever hoped to have. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant when you said this adversary is different from all the others. Rintaro's tone was unusually calm and collected. In fact, he felt far more relaxed than he had ever been. Outside, the scenery had somehow changed again. The vast landscape garden was now an old town. The buildings were mostly two-story, bicycles leaning up against the walls. Yellow streetlights flickered, and here and there old-fashioned vending machines gave off a whitish glow. It was a scene that Rintaro had seen somewhere before. I am sorry, Mr. Proprietor, the cat bowed. What lies ahead is out of our control. No apology necessary, replied Rintaro, with a grim smile. I really appreciate everything you have done for me. I haven't done anything, said the cat. You have come this far under your own steam. But still, began Rintaro, as the carriage shaking ceased, and it seemed to be slowing down. I've learned a lot thanks to you. I know what's important now. And with that, the carriage shuddered to a stop. After a brief pause, the door opened. A chill wind blew in and making Rintaro's spine tingle. Looking out, he saw a familiar landscape. He took his time climbing out, past the overly cautious driver. When he turned back to look for the cat, he saw that it hadn't stirred and remained in the darkness of the carriage interior, watching him with those jade eyes. Aren't you coming? No need. You're ready to go on your own right now. The cat gave him a glowing smile. Go ahead, Rintaro Natsuki. That's the first time you have called me by my name. You have earned my acknowledgement. The twisted soul is strong, the cat paused, but you are stronger. Powerful words of encouragement which could only have been uttered by a true friend. As Rintaro nodded, he felt an unpleasantly cold sensation trickle down his back. But he didn't want to run away. He couldn't run away. Will I see you again? Quit it, will you? It's too cliché for a farewell speech. The cat was back to his old self almost. Farewell, my brave friend. The perfect parting words. The cat bowed its head respectfully to Rintaro, who returned the gesture. The boy turned his back to the carriage and began to walk. Ahead of him, at the end of the narrow street, was a single yellow street light. Huddled beneath it was a little house. Rintaro strained to make out the wooden sign hanging over the wooden lattice door. It read Natsuki Books. It was a perfectly detailed recreation. Undaunted, Rintaro marched straight ahead. No matter how cleverly done, a fake was still a fake. There was no moon in the sky, and below it there's no trees or grass. There were no lights on the other neighboring houses. Never had he seen a more comfortless scene. Rintaro cut right through the chill of the night, up the stone steps in front of the bookshop. Beyond the familiar lattice door shone the only clear light in the whole scene. A voice rang out. Come in! It was a woman's voice, perfectly calm at the same moment, the door began to open. "Welcome, young Rintaro Natsuki." The voice was flat. Rintaro looked around. He was in Natsuki books, but it looked very different from usual. There was not a single book on the shelf that lined the walls, making the place feel empty and cavernous. In the center of the room, there were a pair of matching sofas facing each other, something that had never been there before. Seated on the sofa facing the door was a slight figure. Rintaro was surprised to make out a thin, elderly woman dressed in a formal black dress. She was sitting on a large sofa with her legs crossed and long, white hands resting on her knees. She stared at Rintaro in a way that made her seem utterly helpless and defenseless, but at the same time, there was a strangely grey aura about her that made her look
Sit for me,
unapproachable.
please.
Oh my god, thank you so much. God. Thank you. Thank you for the prime sub. Thank you so much. Oh my god. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my god. Thank you so much. That's generous. That's very generous. Oh my god. Thank you for the follow. Oh my god. You guys are being. Thank you. 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 Thank you for the sub. Thank you for the follows. Oh my god. Thank you. There's so many of you today. You are. Oh my god. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Alfred. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pia, for making it here. Where did I stop? She. What happened to your cat attendant? Besides her lips, not a muscle in her body moved. It told me to go alone. How cold. What an unfeeling friend you have got. She brushed her long fingers. Aw, thank you. Thank you so much. I I try to do this weekly. Okay. I haven't been very good with my schedule, but I'll try to do this weekly. Okay. Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. But this Friday I won't have any. I'll see. Okay, I'll see. No, I'm not. Don't listen to Piao. Don't listen to Piao. I'm not. Yes, it has been a year. I started around this time last year. Primal. Fucking stupid. Sorry, my cat's very noisy today because I have to keep him inside the room while there's some construction thing going on outside in the kitchen today. He doesn't like people except me. Yes, sir, my primal. Oh my god. Okay. You wanna sit on my lap? Come. Alright. Calm down. Don't. Calm down. Calm down. Okay, shh. I know. Maybe I should. Like, if there's, like, I should, like, put, like, my cat. I mean, I do have my cat as... Sorry. He's being very sticky right now. I do have his face as an emoji, but that's only for tier 2 and tier 3, I think. Hey, wait, I need to read. Shh, calm down. Shh, it's okay. Calm down. She brushed her long fingers across her cheek. Someone as powerful as I am deserves a little more respect, she added. A chill ran down Rintaro's spine as he looked into her dark, emotionless eye. He took a step backward. His breath felt constricted and tangled in a myriad of invisible spider threads. There was no doubt that this adversary was operating on another level. Up until now, he sensed the presence of a soul in each of the foes he had come up against, or rather, each had had their own way of thinking about books. Finding that had been the clue, the way out of the labyrinth. But the woman before him now was a steel wall, hard and shiny and impenetrable. There was so there was no clue, no doorway in, just a deep, unfathomable coldness. The usual Rintaro would immediately have raised the white flag, turned on his heels, and fled. As his blood began to run colder in his veins, Rintaro looked down at his feet, hoping to find the tabby cat at his side, but there was no sign of it. He could have found 10 or 20 good reasons to run away right then and there. Instead, he held his ground, putting all the strength he could muster into steadying his trembling knees. This time, he hadn't just come along on the spur of the moment. He had a purpose. "Welcome to Natsuki Books," said the woman, flexing her ring finger slightly. "I hope you enjoyed my little stage production. How was your journey?" "I've come to get Sayo back." The woman merely narrowed her eyes. "I've come to get Sayo back," he repeated, but the woman's expression didn't change. "Really? You're not as clever as I thought you would be," she said, sighing. "You say the most obvious things, no trace of originality whatsoever." "Guy don't need no sense to be a nice fellow. Seems to me it just works the other way around. Take a real smart guy and he ain't hardly ever a nice feller," said Rintaro. "Steinbeck? Why did you quote that? What did you quote him for?" "I would say it's a very sharp observation. You seem like a real smart one yourself." The woman stopped moving her hands and turned her emotionless eyes on Rintaro. "I take back what I just said. It appears you have a wonderful sense of humor. Inviting you here were apparently worth the effort. You know, I have no idea what your intentions are, but try to be polite. Thank you for having me." My, you have a shorter temper than the rumor would have it. I had heard you were a nice boy, not the sort to trade barbs." "Fair points," thought Rintaro. Even his heart was racing. His mind was unusually clear. It was powered by his anger. "I'll ask you once more. Let Sayo go. I don't know what business you have with me, but she has absolutely nothing to do with it." "My business with you is straightforward. I just wanted to talk to you," said the woman. Rintaro flummoxed. "But if you wanted to talk to me, you could have just asked me to come. Why bother kidnapping Sayo? If you have so much spare time on your hands that you can relax on a fancy sofa all day or lead a horse and carriage around fountains in a park, why can't you just drop in at Natsuki Books? I would even treat you to a cup of my grandfather's asam tea." "Don't think I haven't thought about it. But if I turn up, out of the blue, would you take me seriously?" "Taking you seriously?" Rintaro asked. "I want to have a serious conversation. I'm not interested in gut reactions or platitudes or lazy attitudes. I want to observe a young man who truly loves books talking seriously about them." The woman raised both corners of her mouth in a smile. It was a beautiful smile, but as cold as ice. Rintaro shuddered as if frozen hand had brushed his neck. Then, as if to repress once again that nagging urge to flee, he began to talk. "I'll ask you again. Did you take Sayo in order to talk to me?" "Yes, I did. And looking at you right here, it looks like I made the right choice." Rintaro took a deep breath. Things were moving at her pace. He didn't even know if that was a bad thing or not. What he knew for certain was that it wasn't advisable to let his emotion get the better of him. He needed to think with his head on straight, especially if the woman wanted to have a serious conversation. The woman didn't seem to be satisfied by Rintaro's sudden silence, raised her right hand and indicated that he should sit on the sofa opposite her. Rintaro didn't move, so the woman looked at him curiously. I see. Well, I believe you'll be more comfortable sitting here. With a snap of a finger, the plush sofa melted away and was replaced by a small wooden stool. It was the very same old battered old stool that Rintaro always sit on at the bookshop. Every aspect of her performance had been carefully devised, but there was not a hint of warmth or consideration for the boy who was trying mightily to stay standing. Every one of her actions was simply the shortest means to achieving her goal. Bintaro realized to fight it was pointless, so he sat down on the stool. Okay, what do you want me to talk about? So impatient! But I get it. You're a boy worried about his girlfriend. I forgive you. He tossed out the words in a matter-of-fact way. Would you care to join me for a little movie? She asked, snapping her fingers right again. A large white projector screen appeared in front of the bookcases to Rintaro's right. Here's the first one. As she spoke, an image of a magnificent gate in a long stone wall appeared on the screen. Before Rintaro had the time to search his memory for the familiar screen, the camera passed through the gate and onto some mansion beyond, entering through the traditional Japanese door. It passed through corridors lined with traditional ink paintings, stuffed deer, and statues of Venus, and a general mishmash of decorations. Finally, it stopped at the figure of a man sitting on the Engawa veranda. This first time Rintaro had met this man, he had been dressed in a brilliant white suit, and now he was wearing a worn shirt and gazed blankly at the garden. The old, arrogant overconfidence that had once filled him was gone, and he sat watching carps swim in the garden pond. By his side were a few books, their covers all creased and wrinkled as if they had been read over and over. Look familiar? Yes, it's the first labyrinth. Right. This is the result of saving those books. After all his book collections were released, his reading habits took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, this energetic critic who had read over 50,000 books was no longer impressive, and his loyal following quickly lost interest in him. The position he had worked to build for himself was taken over by another man who had read 60,000 books, and now he is a shadow of his former self. He had lost status and honor, and all he does every day is to sit and stare at his garden. The woman looked indifferently at Rintaro. After a moment, he gestured to the left-hand bookshelf and a new screen appeared. Let's see the next one. With those words, an image appeared on the screen of a huge space filled with white columns. The space had a high arched ceiling and polished stone floor, and the bookshelf that covered all the walls were filled with books, and there were narrow passageways and staircases leading off in every direction. It was the second labyrinth. However, the main library, once filled with men and women in white coats scurrying around with books in their hands, was now deserted. Moreover, there were random books and papers lying around, giving the impression that the place was abandoned. It looked completely deserted, except for one lone figure sitting at a desk in front of one of the massive bookcases. The camera approached to review the chubby, middle-aged scholar. When Rintaro and his friend had visited him, he had been absorbed in his research in the underground office. Now he sat forlornly at the table in the corner of the room, looking as if his soul had left his body. His stubble had grown, and he stared down at the single small book he held in his hand. This genius devised a game-changing speed-reading system in response to our modern times. Now he has totally abandoned his research to spend hours on end reading one single book.
This gifted academic who used to be able to read 10 books in a day has become an ordinary person. These days, he takes a whole month to finish one. His own books once took the world by storm, but now they have stopped selling. The requests for lectures that once come pouring in have dried up completely. What exactly are you showing me here? Said Rintaro. I'm showing you the gap between idealism and reality. And I am not done yet. The woman waved her hand upward towards the ceiling. A third screen had appeared, displaying the tall skyscraper. It was the third labyrinth. The perspective moved through the corridors of the huge grey building to the familiar scene of the company's president's office with its three sides of windows. Or at least, it must have been the same room, but it has given a complete makeover. The chandelier, the red velvet curtains, the plush sofa were all gone, giving the room a much simpler appearance. The space was packed instead with men in red, blue, or black suits noisily conversing. This will put the company out of business, yelled one man in the red suit. Books that aren't selling needs to be taken out of print immediately. Wasn't it you who told us that the readers were looking for something provocative and easy to read? The men in suits all hurled their complaints in the direction of an elderly gentleman, small in stature. The company president, once so laid back in his demeanor, now sat with his hands on top of his bowed head. The president changed the company's policy. He stopped putting poor sellers out of print and even started reprinting some older, hard to find titles that had been abandoned. As a result, the company's performance went into decline, and he's under pressure to step up as a president. The woman turned his eyes from the ceiling and back onto Rintaro. This is all the result of your glorious adventures, she said in a cold voice. What do you think? It's terrible, Rintaro managed to squeak out. The room was chilly. The cold had seeped all the way into Rintaro's body and was oozing down his back. An uncomfortable feeling of nausea seemed to block his whole chest. Your words have had great effects on them and their circumstances too. But do you believe it was a good outcome? Well, they didn't look very happy. So why? So would you say you have done something re- reprehensible? What are you trying to tell me? I'm not telling you. I want to hear you say it. Her voice was quiet. I don't have any definitive answers as to what's right and what's wrong. Maybe in the end, that's the reason I called you here. You confronted those three men in order to save books. You dared to exchange words with them, and as a result, had a lasting impact on their philosophy. You succeeded in changing their values, and as a result, they are all now in trouble. If they have to suffer like that, what was the point of what you did? Rintaro had never given the question much thought. It would be fair to say that he never expected to be asked. Rintaro had never had a game plan. He was simply expressing his own opinions. He hadn't really expected the three adversaries to change their ways, especially not to this extent. And he had never imagined that anyone could end up suffering as a result of his words. Rintaro stared at the three screens in total bewilderment. It's a sad old world, don't you think? Said the woman, staring off into space. People accessorize themselves with books and stuff themselves with their knowledge and then toss them away. Others think that if they pile the books up high enough, they'll be able to see further. But the woman looked at Rintaro. Her eyes were beautiful, but there was nothing behind them. They were like glass beads. Is that how it should be? Emotionless, she observed Rintaro's confusion. The dark light in her eyes was unreadable. She stood there simply as if she had the right to receive an answer to her question. What? Why? Rintaro finally said, stuttering. Why are you asking me that? I don't know. Why am I? I thought you might have some fascinating answer for me, that's all. Why would I? I'm just some hikikomori. I never really go out of the world. But you have work but you have been working so hard to save all those books, and you have succeeded. These days, one rarely sees anyone with such a strong connection to books. Strong connection? That's right. People like you and your grandfather are rare. I used to know many likes of you, but over the past 200 years, everything has changed. Rintaro thought for a moment he had misheard. 200 years? Well, about 1,800 to be exact. That's when I was born. So much has passed since then. Rintaro was fabricated. The full weight of the cat's phrase, books have become imbued with tremendous power, had been far beyond his imagination. There were not many books that had managed to survive for 1800 years. And even for Rintaro, book lover extraordinaire, oh my god, there were very few examples of books that still retained great power after all that time. The woman ignored Rintaro's amazement and kept on talking. In the past, it was a matter of course that books had souls. Everybody who read books knew that they did, and they would exchange souls with each other. Back then, there weren't all that many people who could get their hands on books, but those who did supported me and unwavering minds, and I supported them back. I missed that time. It was truly glorious. But that I know that it must be hard for you to believe. The woman's murmur cut Rintaro off. I rarely encounter a book with a soul nowadays. What's more, nobody even knows that books used to have souls. The word book has become to mean no more than a bunch of paper with type on it. This is not just about the masses of books that are being read and being thrown away. Even I, who for many centuries have been read by people all over the world, have rarely met anyone who taken me seriously. Even now, I'm still touted as the most widely read book in the world. But in reality, no one cares about me anymore. I'm locked away, cut into pieces, sold off at discount. All the things that you have seen on your journeys are happening to me. I have managed to surmount barriers of 2,000 years of time and of the 2,000 different languages, and it's even happening to me. The woman closed her eyes as if trying to suppress her pain. I'll be honest with you. Her thin, almost bloodless lips quivered. I'm losing my power. I used to talk about all kinds of important things with all sorts of people, and now I'm starting to forget what I used to talk about. If I forget completely, I'll just become another bundle of paper, just like all those little books containing nothing but information and entertainment. The woman opened her eyes again. It's very sad. And in my sadness, I became curious as to what you are thinking. Why you journeyed through all those labyrinths, you have become quite a celebrity in here in this world. Rintaro couldn't decide whether the last sentence was the woman's attempt at humor or whether she actually meant what she said. Either way, the weight of the question was the same. He looked down at his feet. There was no easy reply, and yet there were thoughts bubbling up in his mind, and he did not want to be silent. That he did not want to silence. He reached up and touched his right hand to. Sorry. He reached up and touched his right hand to the frame of his glasses. He shut his eyes. Once his eyes were closed, the familiar comfort of the round stool transported him back to Natsuki's book. It didn't matter that he was sitting on a fake, reconstructed version of the shop. His mind easily drifted back to where he was most at home. Thank you. The season-old bookshelf, the retro light fitting, and the wooden lattice door that blocked out most of the sunlight, and the silver bell that swung to and fro every time a customer comes in. His memory gradually filled the shelf with each of the books he had read. The brothers Karamazov, The Grapes of Wrath, The Count of Monte Cristo, Gulliver's Travels. Rintaro could recall the exact location of every single book he had read, and as he traced them in his mind, he felt a wave of calm rush through his body. I can't, Rintaro faltered, and he did his best to string his words together. I don't know the answer. But I do know that books have helped me many times. I'm the kind of person who tends to dwell on the past, and I give up way too easily, but somehow I've made this far because books keeps me going. He stared down at the polished wood floor as he picked the words one by one from the depth of his mind. You made some good points, but books are more powerful than you think. Even though so many books are disappearing, there are just as many that survive. He looked up. The woman was still sitting there motionless. Rintaro continued, looking at the eyes that never seemed to focus on any particular spot. My grandpa always say that books have tremendous power. I don't know how things were 2,000 years ago, but these days I am surrounded by fascinating books. I lived with them every day, so pity. All of a sudden, a cold wind picked up. It was faint, but it had enough strength to cut off Rintaro's speech. His feverish tone were immediately chilled to sub-zero temperature, and the woman's next words struck a final blow. You have disappointed me. Rintaro shivered. He was staring into a dark void. There was a peculiar kind of darkness that lurked behind the woman's eyes. Perhaps it was sorrow, perhaps despair. Whatever it was bleak emotion, an abyss that swallowed up everything. It was a force that left a merely high school student like Rintaro utterly defenseless, and thoughts alone cannot change the world. Her tone was resigned. She had given up. I've heard plenty of juvenile idealism, tons of lukewarm optimism, over and over through the years. I'm tired of it, because nothing ever changes. As she spoke, the woman's voice gradually became lower and deeper, and there was a shift in the air. Her eyes stared vacantly, and the lightly crossed legs and hands that rested on them were pale and bloodless. She was like a waxwork figure, fixed to the sofa, with nothing moving but her lips. Although she had the form of one, where sat before Rintaro was no longer even a woman. She had turned into a giant, crouching being, filled with dark emotion that had no outlet. I've seen all kinds of temporary fixes, stopgap measures, easy compromises that do nothing but defer the problem. There has been silly debates between smug, self-satisfied people. From time to time, the dangers facing books were brought up, but there was nothing we could do to slow the currents. We ended up being swept away, just like those three people you met and changed their philosophy on life and ended up losing their place in this world. She exhaled, and with it, the oppressive presence seems ever so slightly to shrink. Rintaro finally remembered to breathe. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. When I first heard rumors about book-loving boy running around rescuing books, I thought perhaps he would have some words of wisdom for us. Not that I believed it would change anything, but I thought perhaps he could give us a hint of how we might regain the power that we have lost. She turned her hollow eyes on Rintaro. But it seems I have overestimated you. Her white hands fluttered slightly. You should go back to where you came from. She waved her hand, and something banged behind Rintaro. The wooden door of the shop had opened. Time to bark on his return journey. But Rintaro couldn't even raise his head, let alone get up from his stool. He stayed pinned to the spot. We are done here. The woman's voice was frigid. She got to her feet as if she had lost interest in Rintaro completely, and turned and headed towards the back of the shop. Rintaro raised his head slightly to see the back wall melt away and a passageway open up. This time, there were no bookshelf, overhead lamps, nothing, just a dark, endless corridor. The only sound was the dull clacking of the woman's shoes, and she slowly faded into the distance. I can go home. Rintaro's mind roamed as if in search of something. As he watched the woman walk away, he wondered why he was hesitating. His best argument has been dismissed, his best ideas ridiculed, and his pride literally thrown away by a chill wind. But at least nothing had happened to actually hurt him. He was free to slink away, shoulders slumped, and go back to his humdrum existence. He could forget about what had happened in those mysterious labyrinths of books. There was only so much a high school kid could do after all. He wasn't a superhero. He was just some moody, gloomy bookworm who happened to make his way to Wonderland. Although this time he could take credit for navigating his way through a series of complicated discussions, he was and always would be a hopeless, shut-in, a hikikomori. With a slightly smug look on his face and an ingrained acceptance of his fate, he had suppressed what was there in his mind and his heart. That was how he had always lived his life, and he had been just doing fine, thank you. But wasn't that good enough? But then, no, that's not good enough, he muttered to himself. Somewhere in this depth of his mind there was a glimmer of something bright. The main reason he was here. It was as if he managed to haul a sinking treasure chest back to the surface of the ocean. Sayo! His head shot up, and he shuddered in horror. The sound of retreating footsteps was fading quickly. He jumped up. Wait, please! He yelled with all his strength, but his voice was swallowed up by the long dark corridor. The sound of the woman's footstep continued farther into the distance. Where's Sayo? Please give her back! His voice echoed hopelessly. There was no reply beside the ever fainter footsteps. Rintaro turned and looked at the lattice door behind him. It was wide open as if to say, Look, here's the way out. Go through me and everything will be back to normal. Ordinary, depressing, constricted, but at least there's no need to work up your courage. You don't even need self-respect. Rintaro imagined himself sitting in a warm, cozy bookshop, yet his feet didn't budge. The goal of this journey hadn't been to get himself home quickly. He couldn't ignore his real purpose. He closed his eyes, clenched his fists, and turned his back on the doorway. He began to walk in the direction of the dark corridor at the back of the room. As he entered, everything turned pitch black. He couldn't see anything. His own feet. It was impossible to hurry. He could only depend on the sensation of the hard floor beneath his shoes and the regular tap-tap sound that they make. Sweat broke out on his back. He didn't look around because he was calm and confident, but because he knew he might freak out if he couldn't see an exit. Deep in his mind, negative emotions simmered. Fear, regret, self-loathing. If he let the bubble up now, they might boil over and then there would be nothing he could do. Rintaro tried to keep himself calm by thinking of other things. He thought about his school life, his preparations to move, his friendly aunt, the memory of his kind and gentle grandfather, and all the books in his shelves, the enigmatic smile on the face of the tabby cat, and the laughter of his classmates. He stared straight ahead and kept on walking. He couldn't make out the figure of the woman, but he could still hear the sound of her footsteps. At least, they weren't getting any farther. The anxiety in his heart began to subside. His stride began to gain some strength. As he walked, he started to talk to nobody in particular. You know, I've been thinking about books. His voice rang out in the darkness. No reply came, just the monotonous click-clack of shoes in the distance, regular as the ticking of a clock. I've been wondering exactly what in this power that books possess. Grandpa used to say it all the time. Books have tremendous power, but what is that power really? As he spoke, a strange heat began to burn deep inside him, like a dormant of fire that smoldered on despite all attempts to douse it. Books can give us knowledge, wisdom, values, a view of the world, and so much more. The joy of learning something you didn't know before and seeing things in a whole new way is exciting, but somehow I believe that they gave us something more important than that. Rintaro tried to scoop up all the diverse thoughts that came fluttering into his mind like snowflakes and then turn them into words. Each time he thought he had captured one, it melted away, but he kept walking deep in thought, determined to express even a part of what he wanted to say. I don't believe I have any special powers, and that includes powers to change anything. But if there is one thing I am good at is talking about books, and I still have plenty to say. I've been thinking over the topic of power of books for a long time now, and I believe I have found the answer. Rintaro came to an abrupt halt, staring into the darkness. Books! Teach us how to care about others! His voice wasn't loud, but it still resonated. The footstep stops. There was a silence so deep that it seemed to swallow everything. Rintaro peered into the darkness, but he couldn't see the woman. Undaunted, he continued to speak at the presence he knew was out there. Books are filled with human thoughts and feelings. People suffering, people who are sad or happy, laughing with joy. By reading their words and their stories, by experiencing them together, we learn about the hearts and minds of other people besides ourselves. And thanks to books, it is possible to learn not only about the people around us every day, but people living in totally different worlds. It was still quiet. Footsteps hadn't resumed. Rintaro took this as an encouraging sign and continued talking. Don't hurt anyone. Never bully people weaker than yourself. Help out those in need. Some would say that these rules are obvious, but the truth is the obvious is no longer obvious in today's world. What's worse is that some people even ask why. They don't understand why they shouldn't hurt other people. It's not simple thing to explain. It's not logical. But if they read books, they will understand. It's far more important than using logic to explain something. Human beings don't live alone, and a book is a way to show them that. Rintaro did his best to explain to the invisible listener. I think the power of books is that they teach us to care about others. It's a power that gives people courage and also supports them in return. Rintaro broke off for a moment, biting his lip. Because you seem to have forgotten, he resumed with all the strength he could muster. I'm going to say it as loud as I can. Empathy. That's the power of books. His voice reverberated in the pitch-black space. As the sound faded away, the air seemed to brighten, and before he knew it, his vision was restored. Rintaro found himself back in the same strange replica of Natsuki books. Besides him was the stool that he had been sitting on, and in front of him, the sofa, the woman standing behind it as if she has been there all along. The entrance door was still wide open, but the pitch-black passageway at the back of the shop was nowhere to be seen. There was nothing but a simple wooden wall. The three screens still showed the three men from the labyrinth, and nothing had changed with them. Was the walk through the passageway a dream? Rintaro could no longer tell for sure how much of this was true, but one thing had changed, and that was Rintaro himself. I'm sorry, he said with a bow of his head. You told me to leave, but I can't go yet. You haven't given Sayo back. The woman didn't answer. There was still no hint of light or warmth in his eye, just a chill enough to make anyone shudder. And yet, Rintaro didn't panic. His opponent was much greater than he was, and there was no way for him to express all his thoughts right away. But the fact that she had stopped and turned around to listen to him was significant. So many people are trying to destroy our precious books, she said. If books are destroyed, they lose their power. No matter how powerful they are, books are regularly locked away, cut up, sold off, and eventually die. And I'm sure in this future, This will only in the future. This will only continue. Yes, but they won't die out. At Rintaro's gentle words, the woman's hair seems to quiver slightly. Even if you try to destroy a book, it doesn't disappear that easily. Right now, in all places all over the world, people have connections to books. The fact that you are here with me right now is the best proof of that. The woman's eyebrows moved ever so slightly in surprise. That was the first expression that had ever crossed her face. There was a pause. Then, as if it had been waiting for a moment like this, a voice came out from nowhere. Well said, boy. It was a male voice, strong and confident. Rintaro looked around the room, but there was no one there but the woman. I knew you had it in you. I'm impressed. Rintaro realized the voice was coming from his right and was startled to see the man on the screen smiling at him, the one from the first labyrinth. He was still sitting on his porch, sipping tea. You have nothing to lose, young man. Just be brave and shout it at her. Hey, you! You talk a big game, but you're just sitting there looking down at the world and doing nothing about it. You are the one resting on your laurels. The man looked amused at Rintaro's shocked expression. Young man, it's very difficult to get things to change, but you weren't afraid to attack me with your best words. I owe you my thanks. Ever since I've been discovering something new and surprising every day. As you said, I didn't truly love books then. Hang on. Cat's trying to eat my succulent pun. As you said, I didn't truly love books then. Was surrounded by so many books that I had failed to notice that within each one was a boundless world. That said, my biggest discovery was nothing to do with books at all. He took another leisurely sip from his teacup. I have discovered that my wife truly makes a wonderful cup of tea. He chuckled pleasantly in a way that made Rintaro feel warm inside. As he continued laughing, another voice came from Rintaro's left. Have confidence, my young guest. Rintaro turned his attention to the left-hand screen, where the scholar from the second labyrinth sat watching him. Chubby-cheeked, he smiled at Rintaro, whose mouth had fallen open. His eyes sparkled. Weren't you the one who fast-forwarded my Beethoven cassette tape? Remember the courage you showed then. He gave a gentle nod and smiled again. Walk with courage the path you have chosen. Don't be the one of those bystanders who complains that nothing ever changes. Continue your journey, just as Mellows kept running to the end. The woman's thin eyebrow furrowed slightly. Thoughts alone can't change the world, she repeated. But don't you think we should give it a try? The voice came from the ceiling above Rintaro. He looked up to see the company president had gotten up from his chair and was addressing the crowd of men in suits. It's not a question of logic. It's about being proud of who we are. The president raised a surprisingly large hand to quell the voices of the protest. Didn't you all join this company because you loved books? He asked them. His voice wasn't loud, but it was energetic. The men immediately stopped their clamoring. Then, put aside all this logic and rationale. Let's talk about our ideals instead. First of all, it's our privilege to publish books. The man in suits seemed to stand a little straighter. Rintaro shifted his gaze from up at the ceiling and towards the woman. It doesn't matter how slight or superficial it is, a change is a change. This time, the woman met Rintaro's gaze without looking away. He looked her straight in the eye as he added, Why is it that although we all believe in the power of books, you don't seem to? The woman didn't move. Rintaro's words faded away and the two of them were once more enveloped in silence. This time, the silence was not easy to break. It was deep and heavy and filled the space with their feet like silent blanket of snow. Eventually, it became so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. This was the heaviest silence that Rintaro had experienced in his final labyrinth. Finally, the woman closed her eyes. I hate this, she murmured. From time to time, I come across people who talk this way. It means I can't completely give up my hope. As always, her voice was toneless and impossible to read, yet there was a slight inflection that hadn't been there before. Rintaro was startled to see a soft light flicker a moment in her eye. It was brief, but immediately faded back into the darkness of her pupils. But he was sure it had been there. Empathy, said the woman to herself. That's not a bad idea. She turned as if she had noticed something behind her. A light had begun to fill the bookshop, starting from the far wall and spreading farther and farther, illuminating the dim interior. The bookshelves and the screens began to take on a faint glow. Time's up, said the woman. What time? I have done some pretty reckless things. I can't go on like this forever. She continued to stare at the bright light. Thank you, Conjuring, for the follow. Thank you. She continued to stare at the bright light that was filling the bookshop. You really should leave this time. If you don't go now, you may never be able to get home. It's okay. You don't need to worry about your girlfriend. As he nodded his understanding, the room got steadily lighter around him. So, this is goodbye? Yes. It's been... The woman seemed to hesitate a moment. It's been a pleasure. It was nice to meet you too, said Rintaro. He bowed deeply and the woman acknowledged it with a nod. You really do know some... You really do have some admirable qualities, she said. But were you just humoring me just then? No, not at all. Thanks to meeting you, I've realized something very important. The woman watched Rintaro as he bowed deeply once again, clearly expressing his gratitude. What a pleasant parting words. With that, the woman raised her hand and the three screens all vanished, revealing once again the sad empty bookshelves, but then, she reached out and touched the bookcases. This time, in a rush of bluish white light, books began to appear one after the other on the shelves until the shelves were all packed full of books, all arranged in proper order. I think this suits the space much better, said the woman without smiling. Rintaro realized that this was her way of saying thank you. Me too, he said. I think this is much better. He smiled at the woman and expressionless, she nodded back. It was almost imperceptible, but it was a nod. The light grew stronger, enveloping the bookcases and the sofa and the two of them. Rintaro could do nothing but stand there. The woman's thin, bloodless lips moved as if she was saying something. But thank you. Ando? As if she was saying something, but the words failed to reach Rintaro's ears. Then she turned her back on him. Rintaro was unexpectedly impressed by the ease of her demeanor, as she walked away with no sign of regret. Thank you. As Rintaro let the pure light wash over him, he was sure that this had been her own parting words. How much time had passed? It was hard to say. Rintaro found himself sitting in the familiar wooden floor of Natsuki Books. In his arms, sleeping peacefully, was his classmate. At the back of the end of the shop was the simple wooden wall, and outside the front door, the street was bright with dusting of snow. Sayo? He whispered, and her eyes immediately popped open. Natsuki? Rintaro sighed with a relief at the sound of her voice. Looking up at him, Sayo waited for a moment before speaking. You okay? I think it's my line. Rintaro smiled wryly, and Sayo smiled back at him. It was the familiar charming smile that she gave him whenever she dropped by to see him. She glanced around the shop. Looks like you got to bring me home then. That's the agreement. Rintaro took Sayo's hand and stood up. He was facing her with his back to the door. The soft light shining in through the latticework from the snowy exterior made her look more radiant than before. Is welcome back the right thing to say in this situation? Rintaro asked. Sayo shook her head. Nope. She smiled at Rintaro's confused expression. You should say, Merry Christmas. This was an expression a little unfamiliar to Rintaro, but It had a lovely ring to it. Merry Christmas, he repeated with a smile. And that was the end of the fifth chapter of The Cat Who Saved Books, and then we have a little few more pages of the last chapter. Let me stretch. One more chapter, and it's just a few more pages. Please hold on with me, guys. Okay. We are now reading the last chapter of The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Matsukawa, the chapter named How It All Ended. Clematis was his grandpa's favorite flower. The old man had a particular love for this deepest, richest blue variety. Rintaro recalled his grandfather's face squinting in the bright sun of early summer as he admired the open petals. His Japanese name, literally iron-lined flower, seemed to suit its elegant straight lines and elegant and gentle curves than its botanical name. He remembered how his grandfather had been unusually talkative as he filled the plant pots in front of the shop with his clematis. I can do this, he thought, as he began to water the plant. He felt more at peace than he had lately. It had been 3 months since his grandfather had passed away. The seasons had moved on, bringing with them a change in scenery. The snow under the eaves had melted, the plum blossoms had flowered, and now the buds on the cherry trees were about to burst open. As the seasons flowed by along their regular course, Rintaro had been keeping his own regular schedule. Every morning at 6 a.m., he would open up the wooden lattice door to let out the little shop. Then he would take a broom and sweep the front steps, water the plants now covered in fresh new leaves, and then sweep out the interior of the shop. "You're really on top of it!" Just as he was about done with the cleaning, he heard Sayo's cheerful voice, and she walked in carrying her black instrument case. Rintaro had recently learned that she played the bass clarinet. He had never heard of the instrument, but reliable sources told him that Sayo was the only one in the band who could play it. "You do this day in, day out." She sat down on a stool in the middle of the shop. "Is it really necessary to clean the shop every day?" Rintaro laughed as he took the books off the shelf and dusted them one by one. "It's fine. You and I are different people. I don't have any club activities to go to in the morning. New books catch my interest every time I clean it, so it's a lot of fun." "You're such a nerd." Sayo was as blunt as ever, which Rintaro always found refreshing. "But this book is really terrible, don't you think?" As she spoke, she produced a thick hardback book from her shoulder bag. "I just don't get it at all." Rintaro grimaced. It was Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. He started off recommending Jane Austen, moved on to Stendhal, Guide, and Flaubert, all love stories, thinking they would be enjoyable reads for her. But just last week, Sayo announced that she was ready to try other genres. Rintaro had suggested Garcia Marquez. "Did you really read the whole thing?" she asked him. "Of course. It was a while back, though." "Yeah, you're weird. I can't understand a word of it. It's too difficult." "That's good." Rintaro chuckled as he knocked the dust off the nearest bookshelf. Sayo stared at him with puzzled look on her face. Why is it so good?" Why is it good?" "If you find it difficult, it's because it contains something that is new to you. Every difficult book offers us a brand new challenge." "What are you talking about?" Sayo didn't look convinced. "If you find a book easy to read, that means it's all stuff that you already know," he went on. "That's why it's easy. If you find it difficult, that's a proof that it's something brand new." Hey! Sorry, my cat's trying to eat my plant. Shh. As Rintaro laughed, Sayo observed him as if he were some kind of exotic animal. "You're really a weirdo, aren't you? That's a bit mean, but it's not a bad thing." Sayo rested her forehead in her hand and stared at Rintaro. "Actually, it's pretty cool." she said. Rintaro's hand suddenly stopped moving. He glanced in Sayo's direction and saw her grinning at him. Your ears have gone all red, she said. I am innocent, unlike some. What do you mean innocent? You're always reading novels like Lolita and Madame Bovary. I think you are really secret. You are really a secret pervert. If you're going to be like that, I'm not going to sell you any more books. I'm just kidding, said Sayo cheerfully, getting to her feet. However, she didn't make for the front door, wandering instead over to the back of the shop. Hey. It really does just stop here, doesn't it? If it didn't, we'd really have a problem. It would be a problem, but it's still kind of a pity. It just feels like it's all a dream now. Sometimes Rintaro thought it must have been a dream, but even if it had been, there was one thing that was perfectly clear to him now. He was not alone. I've decided that I would like to stay at the bookshop. It was Christmas Eve, 1 hour before the moving van was about to arrive, when Rintaro finally said the words. He had thought that it was really outrageous. It was a really outrageous thing to say, but his aunt hadn't been particularly surprised. She simply folded her arms and returned her nephew's gaze. The awkward silence that followed felt long, but it quite possibly lasted only a few moments. Something happened, didn't it, Rin-chan? She said quite calmly. The question came as a surprise to Rintaro. The aunt smiled at the boy's confusion. Don't worry about it. I don't suppose you're about to explain the whole thing to a middle-aged aunt you barely know. Of course, Rintaro couldn't tell her about these bizarre adventures with the talking cat. More than that, he hadn't really come to terms at the point with how the experience had changed him. But whatever it was, he decided that it was time to strike out on his own. There was no such thing as having no choice. Rintaro knew that now. There were many roads to choose from. What was important was not to let yourself roll along aimlessly, but to pick a road. How can I move on if I don't believe in myself? Deep in that labyrinth, Rintaro had asked himself that question. His words turned into strength, and he felt able to keep going alone. His aunt saw that he was not about to speak, so she had continued. Living on your own isn't going to be too much for you? Too much? I mean, is it because you hate the thought of living with a distant relative? You're not just making this up on the spot to get out of it, right? No, that's not it. Are you sure? Definitely, he replied briefly and with complete confidence. His aunt stayed there for a while, her arms still crossed. Finally, she gave a decisive nod. Okay, if you accept my 3 conditions, then I might agree. What conditions? Number 1 is that you attend school. Uh-oh, Rintaro thought. So, she knew that he hadn't been going. The second is that you call me 3 times a week, just to let me know that you are okay. And then the third condition, she unfolded her arms, put her hands on her generous hips, and leaning forward. If you have any trouble, don't try to solve everything by yourself. Ask me for help. It's not easy for a high school student to live by himself. Rintaro was caught off guard. His aunt was kind. Everything she did was out of consideration for her nephew. If she had been in the bookshop back then, he just knew she would have been able to see the cat and the mysterious passageway. Calling you 3 times a week might be a bit tricky. I wonder which is trickier. That or calling a moving company to cancel a contract 1 hour before they are due to arrive. Would you care to swap places? His aunt was clever too. Thank you, said Rintaro, bowing his head. He heard his aunt murmur to herself, Look at you, Rintaro. You have turned out just like your grandfather. There was no better compliment. Every difficult book offers us a brand new challenge, huh? Said Sayo, staring at her copy of 100 Years of Solitude. By the way, Garcia Marquez happens to be one of Akiba's favorite authors, said Rintaro. I bet he has read all these titles. Whatever, don't tell me that. Now I feel even less like reading them. She glared at Rintaro as she put the heavy book back in her bag. But if it doesn't pick up, I'm going to hold you responsible. Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote it, not me. But you are the one who recommended it, not Gabriel Garcia Marquez. His aunt, Sayo. Rintaro marveled at the fact that he was surrounded by such intelligent women. Oh no! Sayo leaped to her feet. She had just realized that the band practice was about to start. She grabbed her bass clarinet from the table and hurried to the door. Natsuki, make sure you come to school today. I'm going. I promised my aunt I would. He walked her to the door and saw the sky was beautiful and clear. A yellow delivery bicycle went by, bright against the blue of the sky. Sayo bounded the steps in front of the shop and then turned as if she had forgotten something. Hey, do you want to go out for dinner sometime? She said offhandedly. Rintaro was completely flustered. He blinked twice as if unable to hear his ears. You want to have dinner with me? Yeah. Why? Because if I waited for you to ask me, it would never happen. Rintaro got even more flustered. Sayo sighed and shrugged. It's all well and good to chat inside the bookshop, but occasionally you need to get a bit of sun or you'll be ill. Do you really want your grandfather in heaven to get worried sick over you? If I go out to dinner with a girl, my grandpa's going to be going to worry. That's what he would have liked to say, had his mind not gone completely blank. If you're okay with it, Rintaro said. It was all that he could get out. I'll make do, Sayo said. It was a crisp response. There was nothing more to say. She flashed him the most beautiful smile he had ever seen and set off down the road. As he listened to her footsteps, Rintaro's mouth fell open. Sayo! He managed to shout. His classmate turned around. Thank you! His shy voice came out louder than he had expected. Sayo seemed surprised. He wasn't normally so direct, but his words were powered by a great depth of feeling. In fact, he had many feelings for this friend who had dropped in to care for him so many times. He had been struggling with how to express all this to her, but thank you seems to suffice. Sayo was still standing there, and he raised his voice once again. I'm really grateful. So much has been thanks to you. What's up with you all of a sudden? Yuck. Hey, Yuzuki, looks like you are blushing now. I am not. She turned and ran down the road. The bright sunshine fell on Rintaro's back, and he felt his uniform warm against his skin. As he stood there seeing Sayo off, he suddenly heard a deep voice in his ear. Good luck, Mr. Proprietor. Startled, Rintaro turned and looked around, but of course there was nobody to be seen. He thought that he might caught a glimpse of the back of a tabby cat disappearing over the fence across the street, but he couldn't be certain. The street seemed just the way it always was. He stood there for a moment before giving a little smile. I'll do my best, Rintaro said. He looked up at the sky. He would go back inside, finish cleaning, drink a cup of his usual asam tea, and read a few pages of a book. When it was time, he would shut up the shop, pick up his school bag, and head to school. Going to school might be dull, but he didn't want to wreck any more absences and make the class rep angry. Problems remained, and he had yet to completely resolve any of them. But now, all he had to do was to follow the path that he had chosen for himself. Leaving the lattice door open, he went back into the shop and got out his tea set. He boiled the water from the kettle and poured it into his grandfather's well-used teapot. He heard laughter from the outside in the street. It was the local primary school students passing by on their way to school. The presence of more people signaled in the beginning of a new day. Surrounded by the pleasant aroma of tea, Rintaro carefully opened his book. A gentle breeze brushed the doorbell, and it gave a cheerful ring. And that is the end of The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Matsukawa. Thank you so much for joining me today on this reading session. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. ありがとうございます。Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sadie. Thank you, Altrin, for the follow and the prime sub. Thank you, Morokai. Yeah, all new here today. Thank you, Piao. Somehow you made it today. Alright. So, I was gone for 3 weeks because I had to go somewhere else earlier this month for 3 weeks. It's kind of a holiday, but not really. Yeah, kind of a holiday. And I didn't have a chance to do the readings for like 3 weeks for the first 3 weeks in the March, basically. I am really trying to make a more regular schedule regarding Noodibles, the reading session. So, I have a lot of books. I'm just gonna say I have a lot of books. A lot of books. And I really want to read all of them. And what's better than to read to all of you while I'm reading them, right? So, okay, babbling. I'm just babbling nonstop. Anyway, thank you to everyone who listened today. Thank you to Cardinal, Swiss Roll. Thank you to Atrin for the follow. Thank you to Morokai for the follow. Thank you to Atrin for the prime sub. That's insane. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Sedi. Thank you to Arum for dropping by as well. I don't know if Suya. Thank you, Piao, for making it here today. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Conjuring, for finally following my channel. I've known Conjuring for so long, but yeah. I will try to make a more regular reading schedule. It would be probably in. I'm sorry about the ads. I really try my best to like lessen ads. I do it like 1 hour every hour, I think. Yeah, and I usually stream for like 2 to 3 hours. So, thank you so much. Thank you, Atrun. Thank you, Morokai. Uh, Next week we will be reading. I hope that I won't let you guys down, but by canceling. But next week we will be reading Kazuo Ishiguro's book because he's my favorite author, and nobody can stop me from reading Kazuo Ishiguro's books. We are reading When We Were Orphans. But Kazuo Ishiguro's books are very difficult to read, in the sense that it's very British, and also he goes by parts and chapters, and sometimes it's like super. Okay. I think I can do part 1 next Monday. Kazuo Ishiguro's books definitely are very, very long and jam-packed with like very difficult words to pronounce. But it's a great way for me to learn English, really. I'm babbling right now, but don't mind me too much. I hope to see you guys next week. I do not think that I will be streaming on Friday. There's a power trip in your house? Oh god. That's my nightmare. I hate it when when you know the house blackout or something. Anyway, next week we are reading on Monday. So usually my Noodible schedule is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hey, yeah, I will rest. I'll try my best to rest well before next week. I really want to do a regular reading session. So anyway, you guys can always come here and hang out in the basement here or anywhere. Feel free to like AFK chill in this place. I try to make it as comfortable as possible. I think this one is very comfortable. I also have my Noodible room. I think the next time I'm reading, I'm gonna use my Noodible room to read instead. I don't know. I'll see. I'll see how it goes. Um, holy shit. Okay, so basically, the book that I'm going to read next week has like 7 parts. Wednesday's your favorite? I read on Wednesday evening. I read on Wednesday and Friday evenings. Maybe I will stream later tonight because I think I'm gonna be raiding with my new casual static for Uwu. 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 Um, and yeah. Thank you once again for everything today. Followers going list is almost hitting 160, so I'm looking forward um, to 160, and then we look forward to 170. We don't be too ambitious at a time. We go by 10 every time. Ha ha ha. Sorry for being awkward. Thank you for listening to my readings. I know I have problems pronouncing words. I'm sorry for my cat being noisy in the background. I'm sorry for pausing sometimes and everything. Because on YouTube, I port my videos to YouTube, and on YouTube there's a set of people who actually just wants to listen to the story. So to those people, I apologize for pausing in between reading because I need to drink water, I need to stretch, I need to take care of my cat, I need to talk to my chat. I apologize for interrupting the readings, the storybook. I do apologize for that. I hope you all understand that I do this live, so I have to interact with various things and people. So for YouTube viewers, I'm sorry, but I hope you guys will continue to watch my videos, because one of my video on YouTube, the algorithm was being very kind to it. There was like over 2,000 views on that video. I'm very surprised. I'm like super surprised actually. But views doesn't really matter. Like views matters, but not like it's so much harder to partner on YouTube than Twitch. I mean, I'm not that I'm partner with Twitch already. I'm still a lowly associate. What? Twisty is linking the video? Really? Oh god. No. Yes, this is my YouTube channel. I have 43 subscribers. Okay. Thank you, Morokai. You don't have to. You guys can go. Don't feel like you have to sit here and listen to me babble. I'm just babbling right now. I usually just talk nonsense after the stream ends. 44 now? Hell yeah! Hell yeah! Yes. But faster! Somebody faster subscribe. 44 is a very bad number for Chinese. Oh my god. Thank you, Atrin, for the Prime sub. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Morokai. Thank you for the follow. Seriously, thank you so much. And Piao, let's raid again some of these days. We gotta get all those mounts, huh? Have you gotten all the mounts already? Tonight I'll be Rating, I think. I think. Oh god. Tonight I will be rating Uwu, I think. I do think that I will be rating Uwu today. I think it's Wednesday, but I'm not sure. We'll see, okay? Thank you, Piao, for making it here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Seriously, thank you. Okay, guys. Working till midnight? Yeah, sure. No problem. Don't work too hard. I mean, I'm going to work as soon as I shut off my stream as well. Well, I'm gonna send you all off with my favorite song in the world. Have a great day, guys and boys and girls.
Have you ever had a dream that you could know do skip you know do skip you wanna know do skip.
Bye bye. Take care. Thank you, Sisra. Bye. Thank you, Piao. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone, for the follows and sub. And thank you so much. I'll see you all next time. Sayonara. No, mata ne.